Good evening, and welcome to the November 20th, 2023 meeting of the Lake Oswego Development Review Commission. The meeting will now come to order. Administrator Kluge, please call the roll of commissioners present.
Chair Arthur.
Here.
Vice Chair Poinsett.
Here.
Sangri.
Here.
Dews.
Here.
Bate.
Here.
Leek.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum and a full complement of commissioners present. Commissioners, thank you for being here tonight and for your work to prepare for the meeting and to attend the meeting and participate. I'd also like to express appreciation to Vice Chair Bruce Poinsett for his skillful leadership of the October 16th, 2023 meeting of the DRC when I couldn't be here. Thank you, Bruce. Our first agenda item tonight relates to approval of the minutes of the October 16th, 2023 meeting. A set of draft minutes have been circulated to commissioners. We've had a chance to review them. Commissioners, are there any changes or modifications to the minutes of the October 16th, 2023 meeting? Excuse me. Is there a motion?
I'll move acceptance of the minutes.
I'll second it. Very good. The motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes as submitted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I will abstain as I was not here for the meeting. We next move ahead to our schedule of 2 public hearings on different applications. So I'd like to take a moment. I see we have a number of people in the audience. It's been suggested to me that we perhaps reverse the order of the hearings depending on the number of people here, so as not to have a large number of people waiting if a smaller number are here for an earlier hearing. So we have a hearing on a serial lot line adjustment. We have a hearing on a type 2 tree application. Is there anyone here wishing to comment either in opposition, in favor, or neutral? Anybody here wishing to comment on the type 2 tree application hearing? Would you raise your hand? Is there anyone here wishing to comment on the serial lot line adjustment relating to 5 residential lots? Is anyone here for that? Would you raise your hand? Very good. And then the others are just here as spectators, and we're glad you're here. So we will proceed then with the...
So I believe, Chair, that only 2 people have signed up for the tree hearing.
Yes.
So if we can, and then it looks like at least 3, possibly more, will testify for the serial lot line adjustment. So if we could get the
should perhaps
tree
reverse the order.
if that would be appropriate, the DRC so moves.
Commissioners, are you in agreement with that? Is that the consensus?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
We will reverse the order of the public hearings as they appear on tonight's agenda, and we will proceed with AP 23-03, 499-23001116-tree, which is a public hearing on a request for approval of a type 2 tree application to remove 12 trees as originally proposed in order to construct a new single-family dwelling with landscaping improvements. Now, this site is located at 2800 Wembley Park Road. Staff coordinator for this hearing tonight is Daphne Sissel, and I'll ask Deputy City Attorney Boone to lead us into the public hearing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The presentation, the public hearing process will be as follows. First, a presentation by staff, then testimony by the applicant up to 20 minutes, then testimony by parties in support of the application, followed by testimony by parties opposed to the application, and finally testimony by those neither for nor against the application. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, except to the applicant, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. And for information, there's a time clock on the table. Green means go, yellow is 30 seconds, red means you're over time. These time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission, testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of or which are part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed the persons testifying their own behalf unless they expressly identify the recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. After testimony in favor, opposed, and neither for nor against in the applicant's rebuttal, up to 5 minutes, and then commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the commission's conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. As stated in the public notice, the deadline for submission of written materials was noon today. No new written materials may be submitted to the commission tonight. This tree removal request is to be considered rather based on the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria that the staff has identified as applicable to the request. It's available online and from the planning department. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria. We ask that you specifically identify to the commission the criteria or standards you're addressing so the commission may consider your testimony in relation to those criteria or standards. If you do not identify the criteria or standards you're addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're testifying about and may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes raising the issue to the city council and on appeal. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. A potential conflict of interest declared on behalf of the DRC members to the extent of their business or employment, which each will identify. Unless declared otherwise, respective DRC members do not have a known, present, or anticipated future business relationship with the project or the applicant. It's possible the future business relationship could arise the initiation, design, construction, or maintenance of the project through either the employment or business of a DRC member personally, or through relatives defined in ORS 244-020. At this point, I'd ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have bias on the application, if you have any financial conflicts of interest, declare, and please state your business or employment.
Commissioner Leek?
I have not been to the site, but I've been past it over the years. I have not had any ex parte communications. I have no financial interest in the project, and I'm a realtor, have been a realtor in Lake Oswego for 36 years.
Thank you. Commissioner Sangre?
My name is Dwight Sangre. I'm a retired civil engineer. I'm aware of the site, have been by it, and that's all. I have no financial interest. I have had no ex parte involvement with any party and have no bias related to this action.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Connor.
My name is Russ O'Connor. I'm a retired construction project manager. I have no financial conflicts, no ex parte contact, no bias, and I have not visited this site.
Thank you. I'm Randy Arthur. I'm a civil litigation attorney with the Portland, Oregon office of Bullivan Bailey. I've not had any ex parte contacts on this application. I've not visited the site. I have no financial interest. I have no disqualifying bias. A list of potentially involved professionals in this application was provided to me in advance. And I did run a conflicts check, and no conflicts came up with matters our office is handling. And therefore, I will participate in this hearing. Commissioner Vice Chair Poinsett.
My name is Bruce Poinsett. I'm a semi-retired construction safety consultant. People smile. I have had no ex parte contact. I have driven by the site just to see what it looked like. No conflicts whatsoever.
Thank you. Commissioner Dews.
My name is John Dews. I am an architect, and I have not visited the site in terms of this meeting, but I do drive by the site fairly regularly. I have had no ex parte contacts, nor bias, nor do I have any financial conflict of interest.
Thank you. Commissioner Bates.
My name is Kristen Bates. I'm a real estate attorney. I have not visited the site. I have had no ex parte contact. I have no bias. I have no financial interest, and I have no conflict with regard to my firm.
Thank you. Is there any challenge to commissioners' right to consider the application? Hearing none, Associate Planner Daphne Sissel with the staff report, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Daphne Sissel, Associate Planner for the City and Staff Coordinator for this tree removal application. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to introduce Exhibit G518, which was received today in opposition to this tree removal application. Many of the issues brought forth in the comment are similar to issues in prior comments and addressed in the staff report, with the exception of concern regarding the red hearing notice sign at the property that was rain damaged. Staff believes that although the sign was rain damaged, the photo included in the comment showed the sign still contained enough information regarding record number, hearing date, and hearing location for someone to reasonably understand what the sign pertained to. This Type 2 tree removal application 499-23-001116-tree is for 2800 Wembley Park Road, which is located in the R10 zone. This property is currently under review for a new single-family dwelling. 12 trees are requested for removal, 10 specifically for development, and 2 for landscaping improvements due to their poor condition. All Type 2 applications must meet the Type 2 criteria for issuance to be approved for a removal. That's LOC 55.02.080. Criteria 1 is the reason for removal. This application is requesting 10 trees for removal to construct a new single-family dwelling with attached garage and new driveway. It's hard to see a circle, there's a small circle or larger circle there. These 10 trees are located either too close to the proposed construction or within the footprint of the proposed driveway or required utilities to adequately protect or retain. Removal of these 10 trees is for development. 2 additional trees on site are being requested for removal for landscaping improvements as they are in poor condition with poor structure, making them more susceptible to wind throw. Removal of these 2 trees is for landscaping. This criteria is met. Criteria 2 addresses impacts to erosion control, flow of surface water, and protection of adjacent trees. Based on the evidence provided in the application and the city's contract arborist assessment, the requested tree removal will not result in significant negative impacts on erosion control, flow of surface waters, or protection of adjacent trees or existing windbreaks. This criteria is met. Criteria 3 addresses tree removal impacts on the character or aesthetics of the neighborhood. This standard is met if the removal of the trees does not involve A, a significant tree, B, alterations to distinctive features or continuity of the neighborhood skyline, C, trees serving as a visual screen between different neighboring zones, D, a street tree, or E, removal of 50% or more of a stand of trees. A significant tree is defined by Lake Oswego Code as a healthy, non-invasive tree over 15 inches in diameter that is considered significant to the neighborhood due to size, species, or distinctive character, or is the only remaining tree on the property. 9 of the trees listed by the applicant's arborist were listed in fair condition, which the city has used as an indication of healthy. None of the trees are invasive species, and 10 of the trees exceed 15 inches in diameter. 9 of the trees were found to meet the first 3 elements for significance. So they're highlighted there in orange. They're tree 10147, 10152, 10153, 10432, 10435, 10447, 10455, 10520, and 10539. These 9 trees will be looked at for significance due to size, species, or distinctive character. Both the project arborist and the city's contract arborist describe the trees as of average size relative to other trees in the neighborhood. The trees are listed as species described by the project arborist and the city's contract arborist as not unique to the neighborhood. Being of average size to the neighborhood and not unique species, staff finds that none of the trees individually provide distinctive character to the neighborhood. Still looking at criteria 3A, none of the 9 trees were individually found to be significant to the neighborhood character due to size, species, or distinctive character. These trees are also not the only trees on the property. There are other trees on the property that are planned to be retained, and they're shown on this site map with the green circles of their protection zones. Even though none of the 9 trees are considered significant due to size, species, or distinctive character, the applicant must show that the removal will not have a significant negative impact to the distinctive features or continuity of the skyline. With the proposed retention of a dense group of tall, mature Doug fir trees, the proposed removals will not alter the distinctive features or continuity of the neighborhood skyline. The trees proposed for retention are circled on the site map there with the green, and then along the road, they're the ones highlighted with the red rectangle. I'm going to skip over criteria 3C because this property is located in a primarily residential zone with the exception of a small portion of Springbrook Park that is across Wembley Park Road there. You can see it across the street. Criteria 3D is street trees. 4 of the trees were identified as street trees, so removal will require an exception to criterion 3, which we will revisit in a moment after looking at the last section of criterion 3, which is removal of greater than 50% of a stand. A stand is not bound by property lines. The proposed removals are part of a larger stand, which conservatively I measured roughly over 208,000 square feet. That's the image on the left. Zooming into the property itself, the proposed canopy removal measured approximately 8,034 square feet, resulting in about a 0.04% removal, well below the threshold. So back to the street trees. 4 of the trees were identified as street trees, so removal will require an exception to criterion 3, reasonable alternatives to removal. Trees 10140, 10141, and 10143, which are on the left-hand side, are all in poor condition with poor structure, making them more susceptible to wind throw. There are no reasonable alternatives to removal for these 3 trees. The last tree, 10147, is on the right. It was listed in fair condition. Looking at exceptions or alternatives to removal, the tree 10147 is circled there, and it's in the driveway approach of the proposed construction. Flipping the footprint would require removal of trees which are part of a larger group, which I've circled here. Staff finds that the proposed removal of tree 10147 is a reasonable alternative to removal of additional trees that are part of a larger group of trees proposed for retention. With exceptions criteria met for these street trees, criterion 3 is met for all 12 proposed removals. And staff recommendation is that you approve the type 2 tree removal application subject to the following conditions of approval. Prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall submit a final mitigation plan for 2800 Wembley Park Road, showing the location, size, and species of 12 native mitigation trees. And prior to the final building inspection for the dwelling, plant all required mitigation trees per condition A above and request a site inspection by staff. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Commissioners, are there questions of the professional staff at this point before proceeding into the testimony? Commissioner Dews?
Yeah, just a quick question about the 50% of an existing stand, and you did that in terms of square footage. Is there any way to tell what that is in terms of how many trees there are within that stand and how many, and the 12 that are being, what percentage that is?
Well, stand is defined in our code, and it is, let me look at my notes really quick. It's in our, yeah.
A stand is defined as a group of trees of the same species or a mixture that forms a visual and biological unit at least 15 feet in height with a contiguous crown width of at least 120 feet.
So with that definition, I couldn't tell you how many trees that.
How many that
Yeah.
was? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions of staff? If not, the applicant owner is Renaissance Custom Homes, LLC. The owner's representative is Kelly McCall, so I'd invite the applicant to come forward now and testify in support of the application. City Attorney Boone, did you have any comments you wanted to make at this point? No. Is somebody speaking on behalf of the applicant?
She's online.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm McCall and I am the applicant on behalf of Renaissance Homes. Thank you for being here tonight and allowing me to speak regarding this application. This has been a long road for us and our future homeowner is very excited for us to be able to start her new home. I have been working very closely with staff and our arborist to ensure that all proper protocols are met for this application. I hope the supporting evidence that I'm about to provide you will solidify your decision to deny this appeal and let us move forward and pick up our building permit. The project we're focusing on tonight is 2800 Wembley Park Road. There are a total of 12 trees being removed under the Type 2 application. 10 are for the new development and 2 will be for landscaping improvements. The total number of mitigation trees required to be planted is 12, and we have agreed to plant 12 trees. On this map, the trees marked in red represent the Type 2 removals on this application. The stars with black X's represent the Type 2 removal for landscape improvements in the right-of-way at the front of the project. Our original application for this project was submitted for the city's review on September 1st and proposed the removal of 14 trees. On September 20th, the city requested additional information after the city's arborist was able to visit the site and assess the trees for Type 2 removal criteria. These 2 trees, shown in orange, were requested to be retained and withdrawn from the application. Tree 10136, a 15-inch lodgepole pine, is located in the right-of-way, and while our arborist found it to be in poor condition, it is the opinion of the city's arborist that it is in fair health and suggested that since the surrounding trees were being preserved, it seemed that this tree could also be retained. The tree was withdrawn from the application and will be retained and protected. Tree 10087, a 34-inch Douglas fir, is generally in good condition and a fairly prominent tree in the skyline. Its removal could have a significant negative impact on the smaller surrounding Doug firs across the asphalt driveway. The reason for removal was based on the likely construction impacts due to roots for the new home's foundation and retaining wall. The city asked if it was possible to tighten up the grading, reduce the length of the proposed retaining wall, and change the foundation plan in order to preserve this tree. Renaissance Homes then performed exploratory trenching in the root area under arborist supervision to see if any of this would be possible. This careful method of excavation uncovered several structural roots between 2 and 4 inches in diameter, located in positions which will allow them to be retained and bridged over. Renaissance Homes decided to alter the landscaping plan to reduce the length of the retaining wall. The foundation plan for the home was also re-engineered to allow structural bridging over the tree's roots. This tree was withdrawn from the application and will be retained and protected. Staff has done a very thorough job of explaining how the Type 2 criteria is met, so I just want to briefly confirm their analysis and add a few points. Number 1, the reason for removal is new development and a new landscape plan. Criteria is met for both landscaping and development purposes. Criteria 2, there will be no negative erosion, surface water, or windbreak impacts. The site is being redeveloped with a special focus on stormwater management and erosion control. Based on the evidence presented to date, removal of the 12 trees, considering proposed mitigation measures, would not have a significant impact on erosion, soil stability, flow of surface waters, or the protection of adjacent trees. Staff agrees and finds criterion 2 is met. Criteria 3, there will be no negative impacts to neighborhood character or aesthetics. Only 9 of the 12 trees met all 3 criteria to potentially be considered a significant tree. These trees are healthy, over 15 inches, and non-invasive. Accordingly, these 9 trees were examined by staff to determine if one of the sub-elements of this category, significant to the neighborhood, unique species, distinctive character, etc., is met and would therefore be deemed a significant tree. Staff found that based on all the evidence submitted to date, none of the 9 eligible trees qualify as a significant tree. There will be no significant negative impacts on the removal of greater than 50% of a stand of trees. Staff's analysis of a potential stand of trees being affected proved very clearly that the proposed removal did not even come close to the 50% threshold. Only 0.04% of the stand will be affected. There will be no significant negative impacts on the neighborhood aesthetics or skyline. Some of the trees are visible from the street, but there is prominent and abundant foliage behind the property that fills in the skyline. The neighborhood skyline as a whole will not be significantly affected. The city's contract arborist stated, with the proposed retention of a dense group of tall, mature Douglas firs, the proposed removals will not alter the distinctive features or continuity of the neighborhood skyline, as viewed from public streets and properties within 300 feet of the site. Staff finds this criteria is met. We have submitted a mitigation plan to the city. For the 12 trees being removed, 12 mitigation trees will be planted on site. Trees 10140 and 10141 have been severely pruned for overhead power line clearance, resulting in top-heavy tree canopies. Tree canopy pruning for clearance would be an ongoing maintenance issue. We are proposing native dogwood trees be planted in this area, which would be visually appealing and overhead utility line friendly based on their lower canopy height. Contrary to some of the comments made by the appellant, the design for this home is completely original and created specifically for this lot with trees in mind. This lot is zoned R10 and has the standard setbacks and zoning codes associated with that zone. This lot also has an overlay, the Uplands R10 overlay, which includes additional criteria be met. The design was created specifically for this lot based on these additional standards along with tree preservation. Additional standards under this overlay include front yard setback averaging for a minimum setback of 40 feet. The maximum permitted height, regardless of slope, is 30 feet. There is a limitation on impervious surface area, 30%, and the side yard setback planes are 612, reduced from the typical zoning code of 1212. The lot has an irregular shape, which makes this criteria difficult to achieve. Renaissance Homes developed this plan specific to this lot, the natural topography, accessibility, and of course, tree preservation. Let's go into some of this criteria in greater detail. Because of the overlay, the front yard setback is 40 feet versus 25. Due to the increased 40-foot setback, we are not able to use the area where the existing footprint is, shown in pink. The trees in this area have already acclimated to the existing foundation, so in theory, this would have been a more optimal building footprint for tree preservation. However, the code does not allow for this. The maximum permitted height, regardless of slope, is 30 feet, and there are no exceptions. The height of the structure is 29'4", so the elevation cannot be raised much. The proposed stormwater management system is a set of StormTech infiltration chambers. The north corner of the site was selected for the infiltration chamber location because this is the natural low elevation of the site to allow gravity flow from the roof drain system. This location is not only critical to the system being functional, but it also impacts the least amount of trees because of its small footprint and amount of excavation required. The pervious paver system for the driveway may not exceed a 6% slope, which also locks in the house's finished floor elevation relative to the street. A statement provided by the stormwater engineer confirms this location being most optimal in terms of function and tree preservation. Since the house cannot be raised any higher and the backyard slopes upward, this creates the need for the back and side yard to be regraded and safely retained to avoid any erosion or soil stability issues. In addition to the house being too close to the trees to provide adequate root protection, the retaining wall, excavation, and regrading required will negatively impact trees 10539, 10520, and 10455. Collectively, these construction impacts are all reasons for their removal. For reference, this is a view of the current backyard with the uphill slope. Another requirement of the Uplands overlay is that the area of the front lot line and the nearest edge of the building footprint, shown in blue, shall not be covered by more than 30% impervious surface. Our solution to this requirement and the stormwater management plan was pervious pavers, which will be installed to make up most of the driveway and hardscape walkways. As the pavers cannot be installed with a slope exceeding 6%, This further illustrates why the house cannot be raised and why the issue of a gravity-fed stormwater management system to the low point of the site is so critical. Another restriction of the uplands overlay is that the side yard setback planes are 612, shown in blue, reduced from the typical 1212, shown in red. The green represents a percentage exception, which is allowed by the code. So what does this mean to our project and tree preservation? The side yard setback planes must be compliant on all sides, and due to the lot's irregular shape and extended 40-foot setback, shifting the footprint of the house is not an option because it would not be in compliance with the code. These transparent blue forms represent the side yard setback plane on all angles of the project. The work will require the removal of 4 Type 2 trees included on the application. The existing driveway approach offers very limited visibility from both directions and is somewhat dangerous. The new driveway will provide a safer access to the site with increased visibility and better orientation to the main road. We believe the applicant or property owner should have the right to build within the allowable building envelope on the property as permitted within the zone. The building plans we have submitted have been approved by planning staff and all associated departments. There is no other dwelling configuration that would allow the property owner to fully develop the property as permitted in the zone and protect these trees from removal. They would decline or die due to construction impacts. In summary, opposing staff and denying this application would essentially compromise property rights and set a negative precedent for new development and redevelopment projects. On behalf of Renaissance Homes, I ask that you please deny this appeal and allow us to move forward with our project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does the applicant have further comments they wish to make within their limited time available?
I don't have any additional comments, but if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Commissioners, are there questions of Ms. McCall? No questions. Thank you very much. Sir, did you wish to supplement?
Hang on 1 minute.
Is that any better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Ezra Hammer with the law firm Jordan Ramus, representing the applicant Renaissance Homes. Thank you for accommodating our unorthodox presentation tonight. Kelly is not in town, and we appreciate being allowed to present her video. I'm going to speak very briefly. We submitted a letter into the record discussing many of the points that we've previously discussed with this commission. And I just want to highlight 3 critical points. This applicant here has extensive experience working with the city, and they brought forward a very thoughtful approach that really focused on tree retention for a project that can fully conform with the underlying zoning code. As you saw in Ms. McCall's presentation, the building footprint area is prescribed based on the underlying zoning, and so it was our goal to ensure that we could build a house without needing to seek any sort of variances or adjustments from the city. That naturally led to the location of the stormwater retention facility in the low point, which then guided the construction of the rest of the home, including the driveway. Second, we've been extremely responsive to staff recommendations regarding the retention of additional trees. As Ms. McCall stated in her presentation, we initially came forward with a request to remove 14 trees. Based on further analysis guided by staff, we were able to reduce that request down to 12 trees. And doing so did cost significant time and resources, but we think that is well worth it in order to maximize the preservation of trees on site. Third, also based on staff's recommendation, we enhanced our mitigation measures and are now providing full mitigation of all trees on site. That means that there will be 12 new trees planted on site, and there will be no need to pay into any sort of off-site mitigation fund. We believe that those actions taken together fully demonstrates the applicant's commitment to work with the city in a collaborative manner in order to enhance and retain as many trees on site as possible. I do need to highlight the fact that, as we talked about in our letter, we have concerns that some of the criteria that the city is seeking to apply with regards to type 2 tree removals do not comply with state law as it was changed in 2017. We've seen some fantastic progress from the city on this front, and most recently a report issued by the city's consultant who is handling the update to the urban and community forestry plan recognized the vulnerability of the code and made some recommendations with regards to a future code. Specifically, the consultant highlighted the need for the city to avoid using any sort of discretionary criteria when reviewing the approval of trees slated for removal in the development process. Again, we feel that specifically the section related to significant trees fails to comply with state law and therefore should not be a basis for consideration. However, as city staff, the city's arborist, and Kelly artfully presented, we believe that the project fully complies with all components of the tree code, regardless of whether they are objective or subjective. Removal of 10 of the trees is required to accommodate the placement of the new home, the associated stormwater management system, as we discussed, and the associated driveway. Importantly, as described in the staff report in our presentation, the location of all 3 of these items was directed by the underlying zoning and our desire to not seek any sort of variances from that zoning. And based on these facts, staff correctly concluded that there are no better alternatives for the placement of the home, the stormwater management system, and the associated driveway. Additionally, we're removing 2 street trees due to their poor condition. This is essentially the function of the wrong trees in the wrong location. As we highlighted, these are trees that require continuous pruning in order to avoid conflict with the overhead power lines. Absent the burying of those power lines underground, we do not anticipate the situation being resolved. As such, we've brought forward a proposal to plant more appropriate trees that will avoid this conflict while at the same time enhancing the community with beautiful foliage in the form of dogwoods. So, for these reasons, we respectfully ask that you affirm the staff recommendation, deny the appeal, and approve the project in full. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions of Mr. Hammer? Thank you for those comments. I'd now like to ask if anyone is present in person or online to testify in favor of the application. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? And I would now like to invite those wishing to speak in opposition to the application to come forward. Mr. Figgenbaum. Good evening. I think you filed the appeal and also personally paid for the appeal fee. So we welcome you and look forward to your testimony.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Test, good. This one?
Looks like that microphone is not functioning this evening.
All right, great.
Good
Thanks.
evening.
Oh, perfect. Thanks for putting this together and timely fashion. Appreciate it. I think our main objection at this time, at least for me, is the alteration and distinctive features and continuity of the city and neighborhood skyline. It's very, very apparent if you walk by the neighborhood. These trees are all 100 feet tall and have been there for decades. So it's not as simple as just replacing with some dogwoods that are 10 feet tall, and I don't think that's a substantial replacement. Now, in regards to the tree stand and the finding that there's no significant tree in the remaining 9 that are up for being taken down, I would say that maybe not one specific tree is there, but this isn't a proposal for 1 tree. This is 9 trees. This is essentially a clear cut of the remaining trees on that lot, and it will completely erase any tree line, which is the peak of the neighborhood as well, because they are significantly, pretty significant in height. But the real thing, the real like issue that we have is, besides that, is the kind of dismissal or non-answer to what is going to replace the skyline. There's nothing there. It's a complete I think one of the reports said, there's trees, don't worry about it, basically. I couldn't find anything that really substantiates that there's adequate replacement there. There's nothing besides those trees, and it is significant when you walk by and you're in the presence. So, yeah, I would just consider not clear cutting down the remaining 9 trees there. I also find it kind of funny in the diagram that was shown, they had trees in the future picture, but those trees, according to the plans, are being cut down. So I don't know what reference that picture's in reference to. So I thought that was kind of funny, but that's all I have on that. It's a significant tree skyline. It's the peak of the skyline in the neighborhood, and it is definitely an added value to the neighborhood that we all cherish. And you know, I appreciate every single day I walk by it. So thank you for your guys' time. Appreciate it. I see the rest.
Are there questions of Mr.
Yeah, sorry.
Figgenbaum? Sir, did you feel that there are other alternatives to tree removal that have not been considered, that would be alternatives that would allow the property to be used as permitted in the zone?
Yeah, certainly. I think, no, I don't think, I didn't see any alternatives. That driveway is, I think, I don't know, 1,000 square feet. It's triple the size of the current driveway that worked fine. For years, we live right by it, and our driveway works perfectly fine. That driveway is huge, and I think, I don't know how many of the trees are in its way, but they're being cut down for that driveway. I have not seen any alternative proposed to reduce the driveway or snake it around or anything like that.
Do you have an alternative you're suggesting that you believe is a reasonable alternative that allows the property to be used as permitted in the zone?
Yeah. I mean, it's currently for residential property right now. You know, someone was living on it for 13 years before it was bought. I think that you can alternate. There's ways to move the driveway. You know, I'm not an engineer, but there's certainly ways you could look at it. I would have a look at that and take a look at the driveway, because it's a significant chunk of the proposed tree removal.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Figgenbaum? We appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Are there other persons wishing to testify in opposition to the tree removal application? Anyone in opposition, either online or in person? If not, is there anyone wishing to comment in a neutral fashion, neither opposed nor in favor of the application, but to provide some meaningful testimony? If not, I will invite the applicant to come up and give whatever rebuttal it may wish to provide.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, Ezra Hammer with the law firm Jordan Ramus on behalf of the applicant. I want to thank the appellant for his thoughtful testimony, and we have several items to review. The first is with regards to the location of the driveway. Would it be possible to bring up a site plan? Forgive me, we never know how to prepare PowerPoints for rebuttal, so. I'm looking for one with a driveway, I believe. Okay. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. So again, as we talked about at length in our presentation, the orientation and the design of the house, the associated stormwater management system, and the driveway were dictated by 2 main factors. The first was site topography. We, as our engineer, provided evidence, and as staff concurred, there is only one place to put the stormwater retention system based on the topography of the site, and that is the northwest corner as presented there. So once we knew that that had to be the location of the site, it then dictated everything else. As you can see from the thick pink area, which is the existing home, we needed to push the house backwards in order to comply with the underlying zoning. with the placement of the stormwater management system where it is, we wanted to avoid impacting trees on the right-hand side of the screen there, pushing the house northwards. So that's how we got to that location. With regards to the driveway, as staff has provided testimony to, if we were to relocate this to the into the southeastern edge of the project site, we would be impacting additional trees. So there was no perfect solution here, and we wanted to minimize as many as possible, and that led to the location of the driveway. With regards to its size, it is absolutely standard. We're not building an oversized driveway or one that is out of the norm in the community or throughout the city. And that standard size driveway, again, had to be placed in the center of the location. We also believe that it does provide enhanced safety based on this location. With regards to the testimony the project opponent provided regarding the alteration of the skyline, if staff would be kind enough to bring forward, I believe you had a slide that highlighted the trees as viewed from the public right-of-way. And I believe you had circled some in red, the ones that were being removed. Thank you very much. This is a topic that we had the pleasure of discussing with this commission several months ago, and following that time, the applicant took considerable time to prepare for this presentation and to make sure that in our current and future projects, we took the words of this commission to heart with regards to minimizing the impacts and being diligent with regards to analysis of the skyline as viewed from the every public right-of-way and every property within 300 feet. As you can see, the trees highlighted in circle are the ones to be proposed for removal. The vast majority of those trees, which are the tallest and which provide the prominence in the skyline, are set to remain on the property. And so we fully agree with staff's analysis that the removal of these trees will not alter that skyline in a meaningful way. And I must point out that the project opponent has not provided visual testimony disputing that fact. So we, again, are in a situation where we have evidence on the record demonstrating consistency in the skyline and affirmation both from the city staff and the city arborist, and no rebuttal evidence in that regard. Just making sure I covered everything here. Those are really critical points for us. Again, this is not a process that we take lightly. We understand that we end up in front of you looking oftentimes like the bad guys, if you will. This process was extremely thorough, and as we talked about, we worked with staff hand in hand to retain additional trees on site and to come up with a mitigation plan that fully replaces trees. With regards to one more comment, there was a visual that we presented showing the rendering of the site with trees on site. As the applicant noted, there are trees there. I would just like to remind the commission that all of the trees with their crowns highlighted there in green are being retained. And so for the vast majority of the frontage of the property, the mature trees will be remaining and providing ample visual beautification for the neighborhood. We will be planting the additional 12 trees on site, and they certainly will take some time to mature, but we believe that they will complement the existing tree canopy in a pleasing manner. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Hammer on rebuttal? Thank you. City Attorney Boone, did you have comments you wanted to add at this point?
No, Mr. Chair, you may proceed to deliberation under this tree matter. We do it differently for land use, but go right ahead.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Commissioners, are there questions of staff now that the testimony phase of the hearing is completed? Are there comments on the pending application? Is there a motion someone would like to make? Or provide comments, deliberations?
I guess I'd just like to say I think the applicant is bent over backwards to appease the neighborhood association's requirements, the city's requirements, and retaining as many of the trees with as little impact as possible. And maybe new trees are okay because Doug firs are not going to do well in the climate going forward that we're seeing. They're very sensitive to the new heat we're getting. So maybe dogwoods and oaks would be a better choice as they plant going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Leek. Any other comments by way of deliberations? Well, I did appreciate Mr. Figgenbaum's concern about how this development will affect the neighborhood skyline of trees. But in the end, on balance, I do believe the tree application satisfies all criteria. So I'll be supporting, if there is a motion to approve it, I'll be supporting that.
I make a motion that we vote and approve AP 23-03, a request for approval of type 2 tree mitigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Arthur,
Yes.
Poinsett,
Yes.
Sangri,
Yes.
Dews,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Leek,
Yes.
O'Connor.
Yes.
Right, there's a
7-0.
7-0 is a tentative decision by the commission with findings brought back to the commission on December 3?
It's December 4th.
4th at 7 o'clock,
Correct. Excuse me.
or
We
maybe.
could do that remote
Well,
because there's no
depends
other-
whether there's a continuance of the next hearing.
Well, that would be to the 18th.
Oh, okay.
So depending on, well, no, I think we could, if the commission agrees, we could do a remote hearing at 6 p.m. on the 4th. I believe the adoption of findings will be the only thing on the agenda for that night because the other hearing tonight would not go on the 4th. It would go on the 18th if it was continued.
Commissioners, are you in agreement to do a 6 o'clock remote meeting on December 4th?
You bet. You bet.
Fine.
Hearing no objections, we'll proceed with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now turn to the second public hearing on our agenda this evening. This is LU 23-0002, which is a request for the approval of a serial lot line adjustment resulting in 5 residential lots, 2 of which are flag lots. An unavoidable utility sewer crossing of a delineated resource protection district, a Class 2 wetland, as well as the removal of 43 trees. The lots are located at the corner of Kimball Street and Baliene Street. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that. Staff coordinator is Ellen Davis. City Attorney, would you like to lead us into the public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The process is similar but not exact. Presentation by staff will start off, then testimony by the applicant up to 20 minutes, then testimony by parties in support of the application, followed by testimony opposed to the application, and finally testimony by those neither for nor against the application. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person except to the applicant. But in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. Those time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of which is part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed the person is testifying on their own behalf unless they expressly identify the recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government agency, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. Following that would be testimony, after testimony in favor, opposed, and neither for nor against in the applicant's rebuttal up to 5 minutes. As a reminder, the clock on the table, green is go, yellow is 30 seconds, red is stop. Following that would be commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. As stated in the public notice, the deadline for submission of written materials was noon today. No written materials may be submitted to commission tonight. Any person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence by requesting a continuation of the public hearing. This land use request is to be considered based upon the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria that staff identified as applicable to the request. It was available online and from the planning department. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria. We ask that you identify to the commission the criteria or standards you are addressing so the commission may consider the testimony in relation to those criteria and standards. If you do not identify the criteria or standards you're addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're testifying about and may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission the parties an opportunity to respond precludes raising the issue to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. A potential conflict of interest declared on behalf of each of the DRC members to the extent of their business or employment, which each will identify. Unless declared otherwise, the respective DRC members do not have a known, present, or anticipated future business relationship with the project or the applicant. It's possible that a future business relationship could arise, the initiation, design, construction, or maintenance of the project through either the employment or business of the DRC member personally, or through a relative as defined in ORS 244-020. At this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have any bias on the application, any financial conflicts of interest, and please state your business or employment. Commissioner Leek.
Helen Leek. I know where the site is specifically because I have done real estate in that area. I received an email from somebody addressing the Planning Commission, a letter disputing why this should happen, which I thought was a little strange. And I read the editorial in the Lake Oswego Review. Other than that, I have no financial interest, no bias, and no reason not to participate in the deliberations.
Thank you. Commissioner Sangri.
My name is Dwight Sangri. I'm a retired civil engineer. I have had no ex parte discussion related to this project. I am aware of the site, but I have not visited the site. I have no financial relationship to the project, and I have no bias that would disqualify my participation in this.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Connor.
My name is Russ O'Connor. I am a retired construction project manager. I have not visited the site. I have no financial conflicts, no ex parte contact, and I have no bias.
Thank you. I'm Randy Arthur. I'm a civil litigation attorney with the Portland, Oregon office of Bullivan Hauser Bailey. I have not made a site visit. I've had no ex parte contacts. I did read the citizen comment piece in the Lake Oswego Review. I have no financial interest. A list of professionals involved in the application on behalf of the applicant was provided to me in advance, and I ran a conflicts check. My law firm has no connections with any of those people, and I have no disqualifying bias. Vice Chair Poinsett.
My name is Bruce Poinsett. I'm a semi-retired safety consultant, specializes in construction. I have no bias, no financial interest, no ex parte contact.
Thank you. Commissioner Dews.
My name is John Dews. I am an architect. I have not visited the site. I have not had any ex parte contacts, nor do I have any bias or financial conflict of interest.
Thank you. Commissioner Bates.
Thank you. My name is Kristen Bates. I'm a real estate attorney. I have not visited the site. I have not had any ex parte contact. I have no bias and no financial interest, and my firm has no conflict with any party in this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask the two commissioners that declared ex parte contacts to affirm that you are not going to consider any statements that were in that ex parte contact, and you'll consider the record, the evidence in the record tonight. Okay.
Oh, that's true.
Okay.
I have an open mind, and we'll listen to the evidence and the
Okay.
materials and
But not
arguments
consider that
presented.
evidence at all.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Both commissioners nodded in the affirmative. Is there any commissioner, is there any challenge to commissioners' right to consider the application?
Nobody understood.
We didn't understand what happened.
What did you just say that?
Oh, so my understanding is that I had reported that I had read a citizen's comment piece in the Lake Oswego Review. The city attorney was asking me if I came into the hearing biased and had already made a decision based on my reading of that citizen's view. And I reported I had not.
And I will state that I have not.
Ditto.
And it shall not consider any statements that are in that evidence as part of the evidence in this proceeding. So it's not just a bias, but any statements that you receive outside the record should not be considered in your determination what the facts are in this case.
That's correct. I'm focused on the record.
All right. With that, any other challenges? The commissioners? Hearing none. No, the question, I'm sorry, the question is whether there's a challenge to commissioners' right to consider the application, whether you think they have a bias or financial conflict of interest. You'll be able to testify later on relative to the standards and criteria.
While you're considering that, I would urge everyone who is here to testify to please sign up at the kiosk at the back of the room and make sure that you're part of that organization or that organized effort. It's not 100% necessary, but it does help our admin staff keep this going forward in an organized manner.
Organized relative to pro, opposition, neither for nor against.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, Senior Planner Ellen Davis with the staff report.
Hey, good evening, Commissioners. My name
Good
is
evening.
Ellen Davis. I'm a Senior Planner for the city. Our application here is LU 23-0002/AP2304. And I'll start out by reading into the record that we did receive some additional comments after the publication of my staff memo on November 17th. We have received exhibits G554 through G585 between publication of the staff memo and the noon deadline today. Those have all been added to the public record of file and are all available. So the site is located at the intersection of Kimball and Baliene with frontage on Inverurie and a portion of West Waluga Park. I'll note that the portion of Baliene Street that is north of the site is an unopened right-of-way. That unopened means that the public right-of-way is not maintained by the city for pedestrian or vehicular use at this time. Abutting owners and the public may make use of the public right-of-way area at their own risk. We'll start out talking about this one part of the application. This is the residentially zoned portion of the application. There are a few different components, so I'll break this down piece by piece. So our first step is going to look at the lot line adjustment. There are 5 legal lots of record that exist on this property. All 5 of these lots already exist. A lot line adjustment moves around the property lines within the site. It does not create any new property. It's just working with the existing property and shifting it around. In this case, shifting around property to create buildable envelopes that would be outside of a wetland area. So the adjusted lot lines must continue to comply with the minimum lot size and lot width requirements for the R75 zone at every step of the lot line adjustment. So the end result of those serial lot line adjustments, serial meaning a series of lot line adjustments to shift all of those lines over, this is the end result. The staff report does go through each step of those lot line adjustments in detail to look at lot width, lot size, to show compliance with the criteria of the zone. And I will mention that each, I'll also address some public comments at this time. There were a few comments that related to the improvement of Baliene Street and the Baliene Street right-of-way. However, as addressed on page 33 of the staff report, because there are no new lots created with this adjustment, it's just shifting around existing lines, there is not enough rough proportionality to require public improvements of the public street system for this application. Now, that rough proportionality term comes out of a Supreme Court decision. It was a Dolan decision. And that US Supreme Court decision said that municipalities cannot require improvements that are off-site that are not directly related to the application, the impacts caused by that application, and that they're not roughly proportional to the scope of the development proposed. So that's why we can't require any public improvements in the Baliene Street right-of-way or along the Kimball Street or Inverurie Street rights-of-way. There was also some discussion about access lanes in a public comment. I'll clear that up quickly. The only access lane that is actually part of this application, I know it's a little confusing, is this southern one. The grayed out access lane is not part of this application. So this application is creating a new flag lot. There's already an existing flag lot that already did not have access to a public street. But there's going to be a second flag lot without access to a public street. It needs to be served by an access lane that meets the city's access lane standards. There is an existing access easement right here that is insufficiently wide to accommodate the full width that we require in the city for the access lane. So there'll be a portion of an access easement that will cross lots 1 and 2 in order to fit that full access lane. It's a 25-foot wide full access lane, and that's going to be required to serve lots 4 and 5. But we are not looking at any other access lane or any other development as part of the lot line adjustment on the residential site. And the reason I make note of that is because we then go into talking about stormwater. We did receive some comments on stormwater. And stormwater review is only applicable to this land use application for the access lane that's being constructed for lots 4 and 5. So there is no other impervious surface. Future house footprints haven't been figured out yet. Stormwater needs to be designed to address specific square footages in their locations. So there is no stormwater design for future houses at this time. There's just a preliminary drainage report that shows that it is feasible for the stormwater generated by the new access lane to be accommodated on site. There will be a final stormwater report which will be required prior to construction of that access lane. When future building permits get submitted, they will be required to submit stormwater reports that meet all of our city stormwater management, manual requirements. So stormwater, and also the city's stormwater reviewer did review the preliminary drainage report and found that it is feasible to manage stormwater for that access lane on site. So we have found that this standard is also met. So to quickly sum that up for the lot line adjustment, the applicant starts with 5 lots. They end with 5 lots. All 5 lots meet the minimum lot dimensional requirements at every step of the lot line adjustments. Those lot line adjustments meet all applicable city codes as discussed in the staff report. Staff recommends approval of the lot line adjustments. Now I'm going to give us some background to move into our next piece of the application. So we have 5 existing residential lots that are required to connect to sewer, and that is regardless of whether or not the lot line adjustments move forward. They could leave the lots exactly as they are today. These 5 lots have to connect to sewer. They're legally required, no matter what. The connection to sewer is a legal requirement of the property's annexation in Annexation 210003. That case is closed, and the covenant requiring connection to sewer is recorded. That past case is done and is not before this commission tonight. The reason connection to sewer is required for annexation approvals is that our comprehensive plan, urbanization policy C4, requires that urban services be available and adequate to serve the property or made available in a timely manner upon annexation. We have a wastewater master plan that shows us where future sewer connections are proposed to go. On this plan, the red lines are the future wastewater lines that need to be constructed. The bright green lines are the ones that are already existing. So this is from the wastewater master plan update from 2013. And I've highlighted a blue box around the area for the development site. That portion of these future wastewater lines that are required to be constructed eventually are the portions that are proposed to be constructed by the developer at this time. This alignment is necessary to serve the entirety of Kimball Street. So it's not just for this development site, but it's actually the only way to provide sewer service to this entire length of an area within the city's urban service boundaries that we are eventually required to be able to serve. This wastewater line has been planned for at least 10 years as the only alignment that is available to serve this area. There are no alternative alignments of the sewer line that avoid impacts to the wetland or resource. If the present applicant doesn't construct this required sewer line, it will still be constructed eventually because it is required in our wastewater master plan. There were comments asking about using other sewer lines in the area, some of those green lines that you see on the map. All of the other existing wastewater lines near the site, near Allison Place and Inverurie Road and Terra, are all too shallow. They're too high of an elevation to serve this site and Kimball Street. And it is not an easy matter to just drop the elevation of an existing sewer line. We do have City Engineer Rooney here with us tonight, and she can explain that further after the presentation. So to recap, the residential properties legally have to connect to the sewer system. The sewer has to follow the wastewater master plan with the gravity line alignment as proposed. There are no alternative sewer locations to serve Kimball Street due to the topography of the area. So then we'll move into the unavoidable utility crossing. So this is the sewer alignment proposed with this development. And this, to help orient you, we have Kimball Street over here on the left, Baliene Street, unopened right-of-way to the north, Inverurie Road, which also becomes unopened north of this intersection. And then we have this alignment through West Waluga Park to an existing manhole right here in the park. So an unavoidable utility crossing, in this case, an utility crossing for a sewer line through an RP district, which is a Class 2 wetland. The criteria for this type of application look at avoidance as the first step. As I just discussed, there are no other alignments that could avoid the utility, so avoidance is met. And again, City Engineer Rooney can come up here and answer any more additional technical questions you might have about the sewer system, the wastewater master plan, and clear up any misconceptions that you might have seen in some of the comments too. The next criterion is minimization. So that looks at looking at the least impact on the wetland that you can possibly get while constructing this utility line that is required. This is done by limiting the number of manholes in the park to the lowest number allowed by code, keeping the construction area for pipe installation as narrow as possible. And I'll show you that the construction area is shown on this plan. And the ground surface will be restored to pre-project grades with native soil, maintaining subsurface conditions. And of course, a native ground cover mix will be planted to quickly restore vegetation within the construction area. This minimization criterion is met. The third criterion is mitigation. Mitigation means replanting in the area. The applicant is required to replant 292 trees that all have to be native species and 1,458 native shrubs. There are specific spacing and species diversity requirements that are met by this proposed mitigation plan shown on the screen. As you can see from this mitigation plan, there are new trees and new shrubs proposed on the residential lots within the unopened Baliene Street right-of-way and within the West Waluga Park property. Mitigation plantings are required to be maintained and monitored for 3 years after planting to ensure a successful establishment. As conditioned, staff recommends approval of the unavoidable crossing as all applicable criteria are met. Next, I'll move on to trees and tree removal. There are 43 trees requested for removal within the sewer construction area and the area of the one and only access lane that is part of this application. This includes trees that are not directly on top of the sewer line, but the applicant's arborist has identified these trees as being too close and too greatly impacted by the proposed construction to survive. 5 of these trees are considered potentially significant, which means that 5 of these trees are healthy, over 15 inches diameter at breast height, and non-invasive species. The applicant did not provide sufficient evidence that these 5 trees that are potentially significant were not significant to the neighborhood due to size, species, or distinctive character. So staff assumes that all 5 potentially significant trees are significant trees. And I think that these are very difficult to see on here, but 2 of these significant trees are within the footprint of the access lane. There's one up here in the unopened right-of-way, another one in the unopened right-of-way, and a third one in the unopened right-of-way. There are also 22 trees that are located within a right-of-way. Even though Baliene Street is unopened, they are still considered street trees. So I've marked these out with a box. So the Baliene Street right-of-way, again, it's all of the tree removal up here. And then there are about 2 trees over in the Inverurie right-of-way. So we do need to look at an alternatives analysis for 24 trees. 5 of the potentially significant trees, 3 of them were already located within the right-of-way. So that's how we get to 24. That's how that math works. And I have, you can see them circled and boxed in this map here. So regarding the trees located within Baliene Street and the right-of-way, as we've discussed before, there are no alternative locations for the sewer alignment, and the impacts from this sewer alignment have already been minimized. So there are no alternatives to the tree removal within the area of the sewer alignment. Looking at the 2 trees located within the access lane cannot be moved without removing even more trees. There was a comment requesting a full 50-foot wide public street improvement with a full-sized cul-de-sac instead of an access lane. This is not an option, but if it were, it would require more tree removal than proposed. Also, construction of a 50-foot wide local street through the unopened Baliene right-of-way to allow an access lane to drop from the north, which would also require significantly more tree removal, and is also not an option that the city is entertaining. And I will just note that an access lane cannot serve more than 3 lots, 2 of which can be flag lots, which is one of the reasons that I believe that comment brought up the idea of putting in a public street instead of an access lane to serve all 5 lots instead of access lanes to serve no more than 3 each. And I will say that staff recommends approval with conditions as listed in the staff report, which goes through each of these items in a much greater detail. I'll mention that we received a lot of comments related to the city charter. The city charter is not a criteria for this body's review of the application, but since there was such a large number of those comments, we will go ahead and address this topic now, and I will give the floor to Deputy City Attorney Boone for a brief summary.
Thank you. As indicated, we have comments that have raised the applicability of what's called Chapter 10, which is sections 41 through 46 of the city charter, but I think focusing mostly on section 43, and that has development on limitations on development. Staff does not believe that these charter sections are land use regulations, and this body is charged with determining whether or not the criteria standards set forth in Chapter 50 and related land use codes, stormwater, et cetera, are met. So we think this is outside the scope. The reason we think so is when you look at Chapter 43, Section 43, it reads as a proprietary restriction. It restricts a specific owner, that is the city of Lake Oswego, and any persons that the city may authorize. It is not a restriction upon property owners that own lands similarly zoned. This happens to be probably a P&A zone, park and natural area. However, any provider of parks could be a P&A property owner. So that's why it doesn't apply to similarly situated properties in the zone. It only applies to a specific property owner. That would thus be a proprietary restriction similar to CC&Rs. As Commission has heard a lot of times about people saying, but if you prove this, you're violating the CC&Rs. Well, that's a property restriction that is imposed on property, and it restricts a property owner from doing something, but it is not a land use regulation that this Commission enforces. The issue about whether or not Chapter 10 is a land use regulation came before this commission previously in March of 2021 regarding the indoor tennis court at Springbrook Park. And again, the staff took the position that this was a proprietary restriction, not a land use regulation, and the commission affirmed that decision. I would also say that, let's see, to be a land use regulation under state law, it must implement the comprehensive plan. That's most critical. The restrictions on chapter 10 do not implement the comprehensive plan. They were placed, regardless of the comprehensive plan, they were placed to restrict a particular property owner, the city of Lake Oswego, and any person who grants a permit to, from doing certain things. So there was no finding about compliance with the comprehensive plan in there. Even if, if Chapter 10 were a land use regulation, which we believe it is not, staff has also laid out in a staff memo why we think that the application would meet the standards of Chapter 10. That is the first paragraph, which was cited, and that is, let me get that up here. The city shall ensure that all development within a nature preserve, which includes Luca Park, is consistent with the preservation of a nature preserve as a natural area available for public enjoyment. We read that as a purpose clause, and what follows is specific limitations to implement that provision. The next section. Well, I guess I would also say there's no evidence been presented, at least at this point, that the installation of an underground sewer pipe would be inconsistent with the preservation of nature preserve available for public enjoyment. It is buried underground, it's not visible, and it would not prevent any park uses. It is not currently in any active recreation area, nor is an area that's going to be converted to an active recreation area because it is an RP district. Staff also noted in the staff report that the development limitations of Section 43 do permit the city to build trails for hiking, jogging, bicycle riding, build interpretive displays, build picnic facilities, and build sanitary facilities. The construction of those items would require, may require underground piping, particularly for the sanitary facilities. If you're going to build a restroom, you're going to have some sewer pipe run out from that. And the other issue in this case that people have talked about is the construction access road, whether or not that is permissible. Clearly, well, any construction of those items as listed, picnic facilities, sanitary facilities, interpretive displays, and trails could require temporary construction access for the project there. There's a construction or the development limitation that says the city will not develop or construct any facility, and a facility is defined as an athletic thing, stuff like that, not this, any structure above ground that would impair or be inconsistent with the natural conditions of a nature preserve. The very contrast between structure above ground, what's requested here is a structure below ground, would indicate that that's not a prohibition. The city is not to construct any athletic facility, telecommunication facility, or any parking lot, road, or trail for motorized vehicles. And the argument is that persons have argued is that the construction of a temporary construction access would be a road and therefore would not be permitted. Again, we don't think the standard applies, but as you look at the definition of road, as we look at the definition of road, we think it does not apply here. It does not apply to temporary construction for several reasons listed in the staff report. One is the context. When we're talking about building trails, interpretive displays, picnic facilities, sanitary facilities, you're going to have to put in some temporary construction access, and that is not intended to be a road to prohibit that. I also looked at the legislative history, and as as set forth in the staff report, there was a competing measure when this thing was adopted, which talked about new public streets and roads being prohibited, and there was some argument back and forth between the different language, but neither of them talked about temporary access for development. And I think also tellingly is the rules of construction. When you think of a road under common definition, and that would be what most voters would have done, a road would be a permanent passageway, not a temporary construction which might last 2 to 3 weeks, for the construction. And we also, another rule of construction is to take a look at the list of the items that what you're trying to define and see what the common characteristics of those are. The list of the items, common characteristics, is an athletic facility, a telecommunications facility, a parking lot, road, or trail. All the others would certainly indicate permanent facilities. And so the characteristic that staff believes that road was intended to be a permanent road, so the construction of the roadway would not be in violation of provision. So in conclusion, we find that Section 43 is not an applicable land use regulation to be reviewed by this commission. If there is a challenge to whether or not this property owner, City of Lake Oswego, is in violation of this covenant, essentially this charter provision, that is not enforced through this commission. That would be an interpretation by enforcement through the circuit court, just like any other CC&R enforcement would be. Even if it were, Section 43 doesn't prohibit underground sewer lines or temporary construction vehicles for the reason I've laid out. So I hope that, do you have any questions on Chapter 43? Does the commission have any questions on the charter applicability? Okay. None? Okay.
So I did want to ask, in our consideration of this application, is one of the things we're being asked to decide is to exercise our judgment on whether Chapter 10 is a proprietary right or a development
Well, yes, it has been raised as an issue, and so when you make a decision, you always apply the standards and criteria to your decision. So if you decide to approve the application, then you would be making a implicit decision that it did not apply. If you want to expressly address it as well, that's fine as well.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there questions of the professional staff relating to this application before we go into the public hearing part of the testimony part of the public hearing?
Yeah.
Commissioner Lee?
I have a question for Engineer Rooney. Could you tell me how deep the sewer manhole is on Waluga Drive? What is the fall from point A to B? And also, if I'm standing in the parking lot of West Waluga and I'm looking at the structure, the restrooms and the exercise stuff and the kids' playground and then the loop that goes around, is this sewer line coming through to the right of that?
No. So I don't have a great picture of the park. I might just go back to the wastewater master plan. So a lot of the park facilities are not in this area. So here, okay. So the sewer alignment is right here. There are no pathways that can view this area. I walked this site with the Parks Department and the natural resource consultant for the applicant, looking at areas where mitigation trees could be planted. There is some poison oak in the area. There are no pedestrian facilities, no trails. It is a pretty treed and wet area that does not have any facilities in it. I believe that the parking lots are actually off of over here, off of Waluga. So this is not close to the ball fields or any of those other facilities.
Well, no, the ball fields are the other side of Waluga. So that red line at the top goes out and that's where the construction ends?
Yes, so there's an existing manhole right here in Waluga Park, and that's what it's tying into.
Okay, and we know what the depth is?
Good evening, Erica Rooney, Public Works Director and City Engineer. Thank you
evening.
for having me. There is about maybe 7 feet deep. But, we haven't field verified that. We're just using that off of some of the as-built that we have. But again, it is nowhere near where all of the public, which one's the pointer here?
I was just trying to get my arms around it visually.
Yeah, this is the park entrance where there's the parking lot, the picnic facilities, and then the open fields are sort of in this area. And all the way over here, so all of this green is sewer line that already goes through the park, various areas, all the way over to here and even down through here. And it's out in the middle of nowhere, except it is behind these homes here.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dews?
Yeah, I had a question regarding the mitigation plan for the addition of 292 trees and 1,400 plus shrubs. It just wasn't clear to me where those are located or will be located.
Yeah, so in the mitigation plan, which is Exhibit F5, page 17, prepared by the applicant's natural resource consultant, the trees are going to be those brightly colored objects. And so those different symbols are representing different native tree species. We do have species diversity requirements. So if you're planting more than a certain number of trees, you have to have a certain number of genus represented. You can't just plant 1 million dogwoods. You have to plant a bunch of different trees to retain that biodiversity that you would get in a forest. So that's why they're all so brightly colored. And then this cross-hatching you see all through this area, that's the area for the shrubs. This map is kind of, you wouldn't be able to show each and every individual shrub location. And when you get into the ground to actually plant the landscaping, shrub locations especially have to shift around enough that they just have shown a general area where that number of shrubs will be planted. But the trees we have, there's a lot of tree cover on the site already. So it was a concerted effort to find areas that have enough opening to be able to plant new additional trees, both on the site, within the right-of-way, and within the park's property, to make sure that they're not planting new trees too close to an existing tree.
Well, thank you for that. That was my concern, or not concern, but just question of where these would be located, and they're basically within the development area or the project area, I want to say.
Yeah, and I'll note that we can't plant new trees on top of the sewer line because roots can get into a pipe and cause problems. So we do require trees to be planted at least 7.5 feet. Engineering would like us to require even farther, but at least 7.5 feet off of the center line of the pipe.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Commissioner Sangri?
I have a technical question that really concerns alternatives, and Director Rooney is probably in the best position to answer this. There's a technology called horizontal drilling or horizontal boring. Has that been considered as an alternative to the trench that would contain the sewer pipe through the park area?
So I might actually jump in. The applicant, we started out talking about boring to place this sewer line. The applicant has said that they have worked with a variety of contractors and could not find a contractor that could bore this extensive length of sewer line. The applicant, I know, will have their civil engineer with them. They might be able to speak more precisely to kind of the efforts that they went to look into boring specifically.
So staff has certainly considered this, and your conclusion is consistent with this recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, boring is always preferable to reduce impact. So that is always a first step when we're looking at minimization.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Other questions of staff at this point? If not, we will proceed to hear the applicant testify. I think Danelle Eisenhart is representing the applicant. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm part of the team, and I'll let Kat get our presentation going. All right, I am Danelle Eisenhart with Amirio. Here with the team, we have Josh Ayers, who's online. When we get to him, Kat can switch over, and Sean Eisner, our wetland consultant, also online to speak on their parts, and then Trevor March, our arborist. All right, let's see. So I'm going to quickly go through this because staff did a great job of going over the application and the staff report. So we will cover the serial lot line adjustments and flag lots real quick, unavoidable utility crossing, the wetlands and the RP district and the mitigation, and then tree removal and mitigation. I don't really need to read this. So that was the case file LU 23-0002 was for the approval of, recommended approval for serial lot line adjustments resulting in 5 lots from the existing 5 lots, an unavoidable utility crossing of delineated RP, and removal of 43 trees. The previous RP delineation has been recorded from 22. So Ellen had a nice graphic like this. There are 5 existing legal lots of record, and we're just shifting the lines to get 5 buildable spaces out of the wetland. So we're not creating new properties. There was some concern about that in public comment. And then we are creating 1 new flag lot. There is 1 existing flag lot, and those must be served by that access lane that is coming off of Kimball. And then this is the final layout, and I just kind of highlighted the delineated wetland that was recorded. That's the yellow line, and the blue lines are the 5 final lot configurations so that there are buildable spaces outside of that wetland. And then we're going to switch over to Josh Ayers, if you can, and he'll share his screen.
Hi, this is Josh. Just making sure you can all hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh.
Okay, I'll take a minute here to
You're
share my
getting
screen.
faint.
Can you
Yeah,
share
I'm
your
just
screen?
check-
Thanks.
Yes, I'll do that right now. So I'm just speaking to the point of the sanitary sewer extension, as well as just reiterating some points on the stormwater for on-site. So this sanitary sewer extension going through the undelineated wetland, our goal was to design this according to the code section 50.05.010.6.c2.1c regarding utilities. And as some of the other points were brought out, I'll just maybe start out with boring. We did, as was said, we did look into the route of boring the pipe, and found that mostly it was due to the shallowness of the pipe that would have to go into place, which is dictated by the elevation that we would have to connect at the existing stormwater manhole in Waluga Park, and then running back all the way to our running along the alignment all the way to our site, found that pipe was shallow enough that it would impact all the roots for trees in the area along that alignment, as well as high probability of small boulders found along that alignment. Then I get on to the second point I can go over on the next slide. And I'll just skip over to the alignment follows I was kind of reiterating another point, like Oswego wastewater master plan figure 6.14. And we have tried to minimize the impact of along the alignment of this sanitary sewer extension regarding tree removal required, the width of the project corridor. So considering the machinery that would need to go onto the site to perform the work, the depth of the pipe, as well as the number of manholes that were placed, and of course something that will be discussed a little bit later with the mitigation plantings that would be required. Moving on to the next slide. This is just a little exhibit showing those 3 connection points besides the one that we determined was feasible. Looking at these in blue, these are the other 3 connection points near Allison Place, in Terra Place, and in Bon Air and Bury intersection. Just using this one as an example, the elevation, even just at the ground elevation in this, at a proposed manhole at the intersection of Kimball and Baliene, leaving our site, just the ground elevation would be already below the required underground connection point of the pipe over near Allison Place in Baliene Street. And we have different elevation differences at the other 2 potential locations, but the math still works out the same, that there's infeasible for gravity flow. Looking at stormwater management for these lots, just reiterating again another point, we looked at for the entire site for the access, as well as preliminarily for lots 1 through 5 for on-site stormwater management using the 2020 City of Lake Oswego Stormwater Management Manual, and determined from site investigation, including looking at the soil type, using infiltration test pits around the site, found a variability in infiltration capability. So that determined that we were able to provide some pretty high infiltration capacity around lots 4 and 5, and proposed dry wells for that, as well as the access lane. And then a little bit of infiltration for lot 1, proposing some underground infiltration chambers, and then flow through planter boxes for lots 2 and 3 to discharge to the wetland. Of course, as the preliminary phase to be verified later. And that concludes my portion.
We ask questions as we go.
Yes, Mr. Ayers, one of our commissioners, has a question for you.
Mr. Ayers, how long would the construction of this sewer line take?
How long would construction of the sewer line take, you said?
Yeah.
It would depend on the timeline of whatever contractor that would be selected at later down the road. As I understand, there's not one selected currently.
Okay, the reason I ask that is it would seem be a whole lot less impact on wetlands and the park area if it was done in August than if it was done in February. Does the city have the ability to mandate when it's done?
I don't know if that's a question for me, but perhaps the city.
We look at timing for mitigation plantings. Those are always best done in fall and winter. But as far as sewer construction, obviously there are easier times to construct, but
Yeah,
unless there's
because it's less mess.
Right, during the non-wet season would be.
Yeah, but can you mandate that it's done at that time? Because then you can mitigate and plant in the fall.
So that would be a matter of timing. And if you wanted to impose a condition of approval, you would look at the conditioning authority and say that you would have to make a finding that that condition that you'd be imposing, a certain construction time for the sewer, is directly tied to offsetting impacts from the land use application.
Because I've had lots in Portland where they back up to Forest Park and they can't, there's a window where they can construct, or they can dig into the hillside to put a foundation in, and it's very specific.
So the city of Portland may have regulations regarding that.
But we could impose that?
If you make a finding through the conditioning authority, yes. You could impose, the condition of approval has to be tied to offsetting impacts from the development proposal. So Deputy City Attorney Boone could walk you through the conditioning authority, and you could look at that to see if you have sufficient ability there to impose a condition regarding the construction timeline or a specific timeline for construction of that sewer project.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sangre.
While we have Mr. Ayers on, you gave invert elevations for many of the discounted existing sewer connections. What about the invert elevation of the one at the end of your proposed route? What's the invert elevation of that line?
I'm sorry, I should have probably included that. I just assumed with, maybe some of the other exhibits might have covered it, but the invert is roughly around 213 feet.
213, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Please proceed, Mr. Ayers or Ms. Eisenhart.
All right, I think we're gonna, Kat, can we switch over to Sean Eisner, please, and see if it works? Thank you. And if it doesn't work, then I will cover his slides. Sean Eisner. Hey. Hey, right now, we can't hear him. No, it's okay. Yeah, I can read his slides and then you can ask him questions if we can get him on. How about we try that? I'll read his slides. Is this on present mode, Kat? Can I? Yeah, because I need to go through them, I guess. Okay, so I'm just going to read these because I am not the wetland consultant. So for the wetland RP district mitigation, it's proposed in accordance with the subsections 4E and through 4G that result not only in the restoration and the enhancement of the wetland and the PRA vegetation along the trench alignment, but also enhancement within more than an acre of an adjoining wetland and PRA. So mitigation for 14,579 square feet of temporary impact, that's from that temporary access easement and the trench, will be mitigated through planting of 292 trees and 1,458 shrubs. Half of the shrubs will be planted within the construction corridor. The remaining will be shrubs, and all the trees will be planted adjoining the project corridor within the remaining sensitive lands adjoining the project site. And per city requirements, mitigation plantings will be maintained and monitored for a period of 3 years after the initial planting. Woody plant survival must remain above 80% or supplemental planting will be required. You've already seen this plan. Here's the mitigation plan where the bright colors are all the trees. The shrubs are in the hatching. This just kind of shows the proposed line and the sanitary sewer map system, a little bit different map from I think it's from the same sewer master plan, just to give it a little bit different view. And then, is Trevor here? Hey, Trevor, come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Trevor March, and I'm an arborist. Been a local arborist for 27 years. I got to review this site. We saw where we needed to go with planning and how we needed to get there, and so we tried to be as thoughtful and as low impact as possible. So just on my slide, there's 46, there's actually 3 of the trees are dead, so there's 43. 2 trees in the access lane for lot 4, flag lot, were proposed for removal. Those are 2 of our nicest trees, but unfortunately it's the only place we could put our access. The trees will be protected and preserved through the construction process, as well as other trees located near the construction areas. We're very strict on tree protection fencing and making sure we do the right things. One thing that's important to me is with all the mitigation that we're doing, and I just want to point this out, that I think it's almost a blessing in this case, and it's kind of weird to think this way. 39 of our trees are Oregon ash trees, Oregon white ash. Their average size is like 10 to 12 inches, so they're actually across the chest height. They're pretty small. They're very difficult to treat, and we have a new bug here called an emerald ash borer. And in that, we are going to lose every ash that's untreated in the Portland metro area. So I actually think we're getting a jump on it. This is the way I framed it when I thought about all these trees. I'm like, okay, here's the win. We're actually going to replace with resistant, healthy, new trees before they continue to extend all the sewer lines. So we're actually going to start growing a mature, disease, pest-resistant forest in this area, and then as the the sewer continues on. So that's the way I looked at it, and they are pretty small trees. There's a lot of failed trees. There's a lot of pests in there. There's a lot of stuff. So that's all I had on the arborist side.
Any questions for Mr. Marsh? Thank you.
That's really it for us. We worked really long time with staff on this project and gone back and forth to try to get every code section met that was applicable. And we're here for questions after, if we have more.
Any questions for the applicant at this stage of its opening presentation? No additional questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I now wanted to ask if there's anyone present in person or connected online who wishes to testify in favor of the application. This would be anyone wishing to testify in favor of the application pending before us, LU 23-0002. Anybody wishing to testify in favor? Seeing none, I'll proceed to orderly call people up who have registered to testify in opposition to the application. And it occurs to me that the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association, as an entity, may wish to register its opinion in opposition to the application. So I'd like to invite the spokespeople for the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association to come forward.
We get 10 minutes.
And I believe Kate Myers is here in person, and Carolyn Krebs. It's nice to see you. You're here remotely, participating remotely, and you're on screen. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you for being here this evening, and we appreciated your written materials, which we reviewed.
And we're going to let Carolyn do the speaking for our neighborhood association.
Good evening, Carolyn.
Thank you. And can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening. Lake Forest Neighborhood Association asks that the DRC overturn the staff approval for LU 23-0002. We object to the sewer crossing of the RP district as unavoidable due to the existence of practicable alternatives. The evidence shows that the city made a land use decision of unavoidable RP crossing at the time the property was annexed, despite advising the city council that the public hearing was not a land use determination. The expensive and avoidable sewer extension helps to create a determination of disproportionality when approaching other reasonable infrastructure improvements on Baliene between Kimball and Allison, repairing a roadway that is in very poor condition prior to receiving additional traffic from 5 new homes on a currently vacant lot situation, creating a reasonable access onto Kimball instead of the proposed 2 side-by-side access lanes. Neighbors have witnessed problems from stormwater near the RP district, and the staff has minimized their concerns, citing conditions of approval for stormwater design that is inadequately presented in the application. The application with the sewer extension and 2 access lanes, which you can clearly see on the site plan, removes trees that could otherwise remain on the property and not limit development. We contend that alternative designs have not been considered. Presentation of facts is necessary to meet the applicant's burden of proof, and we ask that you consider our detailed written arguments where code references are cited, and this oral testimony tonight is to provide summary only. So addressing access, the applicant shows two separate access lanes side by side on Kimball Street. The proposed new northern access lane would serve lots 1 through 3, and the southern access lane would serve 2 flag lots, one that currently exists now and through an access easement. The applicant has not met a burden of proof by failing to show how consolidated access is not practicable. We are asking the DRC as the reviewing authority to require consolidated access at this site. The proposed lot configuration resulting from serial lot line adjustments will, for all intents and purposes, appear as 1 regular lot and 4 flag lots. The fact that lots 2 and 3 abut Baliene Street, a street that no one believes will ever be improved, creates a loophole that the city and the developer expect us to accept. The DRC must correct this oversight and direct the applicant to provide consolidated access. Streets, sidewalks, and pathways. The city's engineer's position does not account for directing all vehicle use for these 5 lots to Kimball Street, whether with 2 access lanes or with a new street. The development configuration is expected to dramatically increase the use of Baliene's gravel road between Kimball and Allison Place. This is a pinch point for residents on Kimball to access Carmen Drive. We ask that this increased use and the existing poor condition of the road be taken into consideration as site-specific factors. Obviously, the wetland location is a factor as well. LOC Chapter 42 provides for these factors to be taken into consideration, and we ask the DRC to do just that. We contend that the city can and should condition the application to provide public street improvements and public pathway improvements. The city has provided a condition of approval specifying plans that shall restore the informal pedestrian pathway within the Baliene Street right-of-way to existing conditions. However, it's not clear that the owners of the abutting new lots won't make changes. We want to ensure that the pathway through this wetland remains accessible as a boardwalk, allowing for its use year-round. We're asking for street improvements for the gravel portion of Baliene between Kimball and Allison. Without these improvements, we ask the DRC to deny the application as insufficiently addressing streets and sidewalks per its responsibilities under LOC Chapter 42. On the subject of stormwater, after reviewing the applicant's drainage report, we found recommendations for on-site infiltration for lots 4 and 5, with lots 1 through 3 drainage being piped to a stormwater basin on lot 4. This conclusion was reached after performing infiltration testing. Soil was found to be hard, white, elastic clay, and when excavated and pre-soaked for 4 hours at a depth of 4 feet, it did not drain at all. Considering this to be significant, we reviewed the findings from the city's contract stormwater review engineer. Their review was only for the south access lane, not the associated 5 lots. The report indicated that runoff and stormwater facility sizing calculations for the dry wells in the applicant's drainage report are not consistent with the Lake Oswego Stormwater Manual. Recommended conditions of approval from their findings were transferred to the city's conditions of approval for the application. So we contend that the applicant has not met the burden of proof for 5 residential lots. The conditions of approval are too substantive at this stage of the project. The applicant has not demonstrated that it is possible, likely, or reasonably certain to succeed. More specificity for managing stormwater is needed, especially considering its proximity to the RP district and neighbors' concerns of possible negative impacts to their properties. Stormwater management standards of approval have not been met. The capacity, type, location, feasibility, and land area required of the proposed stormwater management system have not been demonstrated. On sensitive lands overlay district, the staff says that the development shall be placed within the RP district unless there is no practical alternative and the criteria for avoidance, minimization, and mitigation are met. Our focus is on the avoidance criteria, which is that the applicant shall endeavor to avoid detrimental impacts on the resource altogether by providing alternative site plans along with the development proposal, demonstrating that alternative designs have been explored. Further, if disturbance of the resource district is proposed, the applicant shall first demonstrate that intrusion into the resource district cannot be avoided by a reduction in the size or configuration of the proposed development or by changes in the design that would avoid adverse effects on the resource while still allowing development of the property. Staff says the applicant is proposing to construct a sewer line through the RP district to connect to the closest legally and physically available public sewer system. We find that this sewer extension route is neither legally nor physically available. The applicant's covenant to construct and connect to the city sewer line required by the city prior to annexation shows that the proposed sewer extension route is approximately 1,400 feet. This length is more than the 1,000 feet or 200 feet times the 5 proposed lots or dwelling equivalents required to meet the definition of physically available. We see that the staff is endeavoring to establish the legal and physical availability of the sewer after it is extended. However, that really isn't the issue here. The staff report claims, so then the staff report also claims that the existing sewer system located west near Allison Place is too shallow to serve the development site. While it is understood that sewer extension is complex and requires engineering expertise, shallowness is a specification that may be remedied by potentially changing the depth of an existing system or main. One such option allowing avoidance of the sensitive land would be to deepen the existing main on Baliene St. So sewer extension for this proposed development would be to that main, a considerably shorter distance, and would meet the definition of physically available. The depths of the existing manholes on Carmen Drive at Parker Road and on Baliene at Allison Place show a gradient is possible. Even if gravity flow is not achieved and a pump is ultimately required, this should be considered to avoid the RP district. We understand the impositions that the city has placed upon the applicant. Code does allow the city to condition the application to upsize inadequate sewer lines when needed for inadequate sewage flow from the development per accepted engineering standards. The city engineer may reduce or eliminate specific utilities upon a finding that they must be reduced because the requirement would exceed the rough proportionality legally permissible. Our written testimony provides details about the potential for use of on-site septic facilities, initially the applicant's preferred alternative, which would have entirely avoided impacts to sensitive lands. Suffice it to say, the city would not allow it. In fact, the city determined that the applicant had no choice but to connect to the sewer through West Beluga Park. The city neglected at the time of annexation and continues to neglect now to account for the City Charter 10 Parks Development limitation when ascertaining whether the proposed sewer connection in West Beluga Park is in fact available. The question for the DRC is if the sensitive lands overlay district avoidance criteria and that this development be permitted to connect to a closer
15
sewer
seconds.
that can be engineered to create gravity flow or can be pumped to permit another viable option to avoid the wetland. The code allows the city to dial back their demands. We ask the DRC to instruct the city to do just that to protect the RP district. I read this several times and I knew I was within 10 minutes, but obviously my saying hello limited my time, so.
Carolyn, you were perfect.
I thank you.
Are there questions for Ms. Krebs or the Neighborhood Association in connection with its presentation?
I guess I have a question.
Commissioner Leek?
Thank you. So you talked about water drainage and stormwater runoff. Kimball, in my estimation, is pretty level, but there's new construction right down the street 2 lots away. Has that new construction caused problems with too much water?
Can you be more
for drainage?
specific, because
Yeah.
there are no blocks on Kimball?
There are no what?
No blocks, it's just
No, I know you
one
just have
longs.
lots.
Yeah, which
yeah.
direction are you talking about?
I'm talking about 16006 and 16012.
I don't know which direction.
That's south of the project. And there's 2 lots, and they're served by an access road, and they're new construction in the last 5 years, very modern kind of homes.
We're talking on Kimball?
Yeah. Not new construction, but newer. And they're not the older houses that have been there.
The most recent homes are 8.
We're not going to, Mr. Chair.
We're just,
Sorry, none of us are tracking with
yeah,
it.
if
Sorry.
anyone
What I'm
wishes to
trying to get
testify,
to-
come forward and speak. But right now, we have Ms.
Well, we're trying to
Meyer.
answer the question,
Right.
but
But
I'm
people from
relying
the
on local
audience-
knowledge because
Okay.
they're residents of Kimball. So none of us are quite sure what is being referred to. But your bigger question is what?
She mentioned the drainage, it didn't percolate, the water just stood there. And that was.
So you're asking me about water drainage in the area?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I believe there's a Lake Forest resident who lives near Terra Place that's there tonight. Is that right, Kate? Neil
Yes,
Bowers?
Neil is here.
Okay. He can speak to this in a very detailed way because he lives very close to this site. And I viewed a video online today that he placed into the record. And that is consistent with my experience going through that area. You absolutely have standing water in many locations over there near that wetland. And I absolutely understand the concerns of the property owners over there with the inefficient handling of stormwater. So it's very important that the stormwater be managed appropriately on these sites, on these new development sites.
And I'd like to refer you back to the written comments that we filed. And in the section that talks about this, there were some drill holes that were attempted that didn't drain.
That's what I was asking.
Yes, and so that was in the record, and we found it and we cited it, and it's in our written comments. So
Does the whole area suffer from that same kind of drainage?
not being a geologist and having done boreholes all over the place, I couldn't tell you that. But from lived experience, I think you will see within the written comments from the neighborhood and from people who will speak tonight that the answer to your question is broadly yes, that is a consistent issue.
Thank you.
Ms. Krebs and Ms. Myers, you heard the Lake Oswego professional staff comment expressing its view that Chapter 10 of the Charter is, though it may create a proprietary right, is not a land use regulation per se that would guide our decision tonight. And even if it were, it has been satisfied. Do you have any additional comments in the context of the hearing you'd like to provide in addition to your written materials?
Oh, certainly. I'd like to say that just because the city takes a position doesn't make them right. And the fact that the voters voted 62% to pass that is really relevant. So the problem here is that this process has been railroaded at numerous steps outside of normal processes. And at each step, it's a statement of, oh, well, that's not for this, or we're doing it this way, but it's not. So for example, the annexation, which said, okay, this is contingent on this sewer line, but it's not a land use, well, then it shouldn't have been part of that. It's a compounding effect that's been rolling along with this particular property for quite some time. And so the problem is if every time it's a step ahead or a step behind, at what point does it become held to account? And putting it on the local neighborhood association to have to drag the city into circuit court to prove what the voters voted for seems like a really extensive burden. Now, if that's, anyway.
I'd like to add something, Kate, to what you're saying. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure to add something. It has always been my understanding that the charter is it takes precedence to the code. And so that's why when you look at hierarchy, it's my understanding that the charter, it has a hierarchy above the code. And that's why it's applicable here. We go to it first. That's my opinion.
Logically, it has to be. Otherwise, you could just write code around what the citizens have voted for all day long. Beyond that, though, regarding this sewer line, we have proven in multiple ways how this application has been faulty in terms of its legal accessibility and physical accessibility, on top of the issue with the code. So, I mean, this line falls numerous ways. Additionally, the city wastewater plan, or whatever the
sewer plan, the master plan that everybody wants to hold on to, was last updated 10 years ago, 2013. Well, there was a pretty massive voter initiative that happened in between, and it hasn't been updated. So to hold to a plan that was not updated to address these new voter constraints, that's a problem.
Thank you. The city also maintains that installation of an underground sewer pipe would be consistent with the preservation of the natural preserve as a natural area available for public enjoyment, even if Code Chapter 10 were to apply. Do you have any additional comments to add to that beyond your written materials?
I think the written materials are probably our best effort because they gave us the most amount of time to craft them. The big issue with the cutting down of a 17-foot wide by 525-foot long swath through that's just the untouched wetland that we're talking about. I mean, we're not talking about even Baliene. The problem with that is that even with the replanting, we've heard it's going to be a 7.5-foot wide space on either side of the median that has to be kept clear of trees. And additionally, even if there's like going to be shrubs and other things planted, I mean, presumably there is some desire to maintain access for maintenance or emergencies or whatever else. So even if something regrows for a period of 5, 10, whatever years, I mean, at what point does it have a problem and then more has to come back in there again? There is, and a lot of the neighbors will speak to this. I mean, we had so many comments about concerns too about just the ecology of it and what that's physically going to do to that section of wetland. I'm not going to speak to that, but I mean, that's a real consideration. Carolyn, did you have anything to add?
Well, and I just wanted to say that, you know, it was very clear to me in reviewing the charter that the wording was very important. It said that the city of Lake Oswego shall ensure that all development within the nature preserve is consistent with the preservation of a nature preserve as a natural area available for public enjoyment. The word ensure means that it requires the city to protect against loss, damage, or injury to the nature preserve. And so I can't think of something more damaging than drilling a trench, putting in a pipe, and then keeping it free of native vegetation. I don't think that's consistent with ensuring this protection that the charter brings to the city. So that's my addition.
Thank you for that. Are there other questions of the neighborhood association at this point?
I have another question.
Yes, please go ahead.
So we have a city attorney who has given us his opinion as an attorney. Mm-hmm. Do you have an attorney who has given you an opinion, or is this something you've come to on your own? I'm not discounting that. No. I'm just asking.
I think I'm not an
attorney.
This is a big topic, and we've had some conversations with the city about it. So we're a neighborhood association. We have no dues. It's not an HOA. There's no money. Like, it's volunteers who turn up and do our best to like represent and be a check and a balance to the city. I mean, you're citizens volunteering. This is what we all are doing here. It's a check and a balance process. So everything that is in our thing was, I mean, Carolyn, she dug in for so many hours just creating this document to leave you with something that is beyond like just the snowball of information that is like built on falsehoods or assumptions or things that are not necessarily the only way to look at it. So we're trying to provide you with not only a counter way to see some of the problems of this application, but we've also provided you extensive documentation of like where we found why that should be the way to stand on this side and look at it from this way. So that's all citizen.
Okay, I have another question, and this may come back to the engineering. One of your issues is the sewer line, obviously. But it could go to Allison Place if it was pumped. Would that be accurate?
Well, so, as I said, I definitely understand that this is a complex and an engineering problem. I'm an engineer, so I understand you don't just take a guess. It has to be studied. But it seems to me that you can, it should be looked at. If there could be a gradient created, I'm not sure that I've seen enough evidence that a gravity flow couldn't be created if that shorter main section was changed as opposed to extending the complete length that's suggested in this application. But even if that gravity flow is not possible, then I absolutely think that the pump solution should be explored as well. Just because it's not the priority of gravity flow doesn't mean there isn't another option.
Oh, absolutely. There's a number of places around Lake Oswego and Dunthorpe that have, pumps, sewer pumping.
Exactly.
Our understanding is that there are sewer pumps operating on Parker Road that feed uphill, which are probably a similar distance.
And so just to add on to that, this area being so close to this RP district just seems like a likely place to be looking for an alternative.
Is that your major issue? If they could resolve the sewer not going through the RP zone, would the other issues fade in the background or not?
Well, I think we've pretty conclusively addressed each of the issues on their merit. I wouldn't say that any one issue is like the thing that and we're willing to concede just carte blanche on the rest. I think that the sewer line into the wetlands generated the most neighborhood concern by far, because it impacts so many people, just a huge, huge amount. The people who are located closer to the properties are the ones who have the bigger concerns regarding stormwater, traffic, those type of things. And that's the nature in pretty much every application, right? The closer you are to the site that's going to be built, the more you're concerned about the impact. So in terms of just volume of comment and concern, the sewer line is the bigger thing. In terms of the scope of impact, though, those closer still have some pretty significant concerns on those things. Now, I will also say, though, that beyond just our neighborhood, the concern about the precedent that this is potentially setting of not allowing the voters and the charter to be seen as premier in the thought process has created a lot of alarm across the city. And that's beyond what my neighborhood association is here to do tonight. But I will just let you know that the volume of conversation and concern that I've received back is broad.
And I have to add too that this extraordinarily long and expensive sewer extension, it makes me question whether or not this is disproportional to a request of improving a street that is in extraordinarily poor condition that will receive a lot of extra traffic when these lots are developed. Isn't that what our code is there to help address? This is, I think Kate has some photographs. She submitted into the record. You can see this is a very poorly maintained road. And I can't imagine that the code isn't there to.
But it's a county road, correct?
No, Baliene is city.
You're not talking about Kimball.
Kimball is county, but Baliene is city.
Right, and so the city is maintaining that road by putting gravel down. Kate can explain the maintenance better than I can. But that's an expense for the city. But that roadway is in terrible condition. And I can't begin to imagine what it would be like with additional traffic. I think that the city would want to correct that as part of implementing their code.
So people are really using Baliene to get out to Carmen?
Yes. I was going to speak to this in my personal testimony, but we're on the topic, so I'll just go for it. My property backs up to Baliene. I have an office that overlooks Baliene, so I sit there 8+ hours a day seeing the traffic go by. In addition, I've lived in that property 16 years. So the thing with Baliene is there's a huge amount of just potholes. And the pictures I showed, that's from the point of the pavement all the way to the corner and around the corner till the point that a pavement picks up again. It is just gutted. And that's all the time when it's wet. The city used to come and just dump gravel all the time. And the problem is it just was getting bermed up even further around where the water's pulling it down. And so I finally called the maintenance and said, please just grade it. Like, stop dumping more gravel, just grade it. The issue is that over the time, I now have standing water in my backyard because of the amount of gravel that's been dumped there. And it didn't used to be that way. I actually had to treat for algae this summer when the water finally left. So the problem is Kimball is more than a quarter mile to get all the way out to Lake Forest. And then to get back to Carmen, you have to come down all the way down Lake Forest. So you're adding over a half mile of extra route just to get back to the same place versus Baliene is, 50 yards of hell. So, or maybe a little longer, but yeah, it's short, but terrible. So since Kimball got repaved by the county, we are having more and more people coming that way. In fact, even the school buses were starting to route that way. And then they were coming now more and more on Baliene. It's been worse since Kimball got repaved. To the point when the delivery trucks go through, it sounds like demolition is going on because they're shaking so much. So I just don't think, you can look at the pictures, but I don't think we can overstate the impact that moving all 5 lots, entry and exit to that point, is going to continue to increase the impact on that stretch. Because if you're going anywhere on that side, there's no reason you're going to go an extra half mile out of the way just to avoid 50 feet of really crappy road. So it's just going to keep getting worse. But beyond that, it's an illustration of just how significant the drainage and stormwater issues are for that entire section. And beyond that, the larger extrapolation is the challenge of the wetland through that entire area. It just cannot be taken lightly to say, it's fine. We've found some evidence that it's not draining. And all the people who live there will tell you, there are lots of times a year it is not draining. So I don't think the standards have been met in the application.
Thank you for that answer and explanation. Are there other questions at this point? Thank you very much for your well-organized presentation on behalf of the Neighborhood Association.
Can I ask a question of Attorney Boone? If we want to ask for a continuance, when does that happen?
Well, I was going to note, you have asked for a continuance. It's in the record.
It is in the
written
record.
What that means to the audience, okay,
Thank you.
is that we're going to take all the testimony, all oral testimony. Once that is done, then the commission will have to will continue the hearing. It may continue the hearing for written testimony only, or it may continue the hearing to take additional written and oral testimony. That's up to the commission, and the commission will decide that at the end of all of the testimony. So the point is, to some of the people in the audience, if you don't get a chance to, if time requires you to leave, you can still at least file a written comment.
Okay, and we would like to request that you would consider both written and oral testimony. Thank you.
And the reason for that is that we would like to make sure that you can ask questions like you have tonight of written testimony. There are some things that are not really in the record that we need to be able to take a look at, that we've put in writing in our continuance justifications that are substantive to the arguments. And we would like the opportunity to be able to present those again.
Thank you very much. We'll consider that when we get to that
Okay,
point.
thank you.
We appreciate your testimony and your written materials. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Now, also in opposition of the pending application, we have individuals testifying in their own right, in their own name, not as representatives of the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association. I have a list of some names here. Jim Boland, are you with us online, testifying as an individual in opposition to the application?
Jim? Jim? Can you still see me?
Yes.
Yes, Jim can testify through this Zoom link.
Will we hear his voice, or will we see
He's
him?
coming, he's coming.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Boland, good evening.
Good evening, Chair Arthur.
Nice to see you.
Nice
What
to
comments
see
do you have for us this evening?
I do. My name is Jim Bolland, and I've been involved in land use in Lake Oswego for 30 years as a neighborhood chair, as 10-year co-chair of the Lake Oswego Neighborhood Action Coalition, and serving on many land use task forces for the city, both infill task forces and the like. I want to make one comment before I start, and that is Carolyn Krebs is a modest presenter. Carolyn is an engineer. She's also has a master's degree in environmental engineering, and she is a subject matter expert. Please note that.
Thank you.
So I want to talk in more of an overview. Everything I'm going to say here is based on either staff reports or evidence that's in the record. Kate touched on this, Carolyn touched on it. The nature of this land use application before you tonight has some misrepresentations in it. I believe there are two basic intentions on the part of the city that are being served by LU 23002. First, the city has created a scenario whereby they've forced the applicant to agree to construct and pay for in its entirety a major new sewer connection over 1,400 feet long into a lightly served area of the Lake Forest neighborhood. Second, by constructing the new sewer line through West Waluga Park is a clear violation of the citizen initiative, the intent of it and the words of it, updating Chapter 10 of the city charter. One comment right away, the city attorney made a reference to a purpose statement. I have, in consultation with people from the charter steering committee, others, including an attorney, to answer Ms. Leake's comment. There are no purpose statements in the wording that the people who initiated the charter, there are no purpose statements. That's a misstatement of fact. I'll remind you that that charter was supported by 62% of the electorate. This application will be a vehicle to defy the clear will of Lake Oswego voters in 2021. It undermines the specific environmental protection for West Waluga Park and will set an incredibly unfortunate legal precedent for violating environmental protections for other natural areas identified in Chapter 10 in the future. We have to talk about the annexation hearing. They're inexorably tied together. In November of 2021, in the annexation hearing, the annexation of these properties was tentatively approved pending the completion of a deed covenant on the property. That deed covenant, in that deed covenant, the property owner was required to agree to build and pay for the 1,400-foot significant major sewer extension, but they were also required to not apply at any time per the deed covenant for any other alternate solution to the major sewer line. And I would argue, you heard about Dolan in the beginning of this. I believe that the intent of the city requiring the property owner to get the deed covenant saying they would seek no other alternatives was explicitly done to avoid a potential Dolan complaint from the property owner. And that's on the, I think you all understand, on the proportionality of what the city is asking the private property owner to do, which is create
30 seconds.
A new sewer extension. There's no discussion in any of the staff reports involving the annexation, nor was there any questions from the council or anybody during the approval that addressed, even mentioned Chapter 10. And I want to reiterate the sewer master plan should have been updated after Chapter 10. It was not. That's not a valid justification anymore for doing this. Is that it?
Thank you very much, Mr. Baliene. Are there questions?
I'd love to entertain any of your questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Baliene? Hearing none, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for taking part in tonight's hearing. I have Mr. Brad Home. Good evening, Mr. Home.
Good evening to you all.
Speaking in opposition to the application.
May I stand? No, I don't want to stand.
You may if you prefer, if you have medical reasons.
I'm Brad Home. I'm a Lake Oswego resident for 65 years. I live in Palisades neighborhood. I'm a member of the Love LO Park Steering Committee. And I do not have a degree, an engineering degree or a master's degree in anything. I studied Romance languages in college, so I'm just a local citizen here to say a few things. First thing I want to say, just for the record, I'm a little offended and we're insulted by the city saying that this is not an issue that involves Chapter 10 because Chapter 10 does not say anything about putting a sewer underground. Chapter 10 was a charter amendment to protect the Lake Oswego parks from any development. We didn't say sewer because that's a development. You got to build a trench, you got to put in a sewer line, you got to cover it up, and you can never make a wetland the same after you chop it up. So that's the first thing I want to say, just for the record. So how did we get here? The city tried 3 times to build a tower in Cooks Butte Park. 3 times the citizens fought it, and the 3rd time, LO Parks was born, and our main mission was to protect the parks in Lake Oswego. We consider ourselves the guardian of the parks. Hence, we went out for 2 full years. This is why I felt a little bit insulted by your saying that Chapter 10 didn't matter. We spent 2 years getting voters to understand, to sign petitions, to come out with us and educate the people of Lake Oswego and get this thing on the ballot measure, and we did, and it passed. 62% of the citizens said, we want to protect the parks. It's just that simple. They didn't say, we're not going to build a sewer line. Oh, you can build a sewer line, you can do this, you can do that. We did it, and it was all the citizens of Lake Oswego. They ratified the measure on November 2nd, and it was adopted into law. What does it say? You've heard this tonight. I'm just going to say it again really briefly. Section 41, purpose. The purpose of this chapter is to preserve all designated nature preserves that are owned by the city of LO. Pretty simple. Section 43, limitations on development. The city of Lake Oswego shall ensure that all development within a nature preserve is consistent with preservation of a nature preserve as a natural area available for public enjoyment. I don't think that's very cloudy. It's pretty straightforward. The city claimed the people did not understand what they voted for when we got this thing passed, and I beg to differ. They knew exactly what they were voting for. They were voting to protect the parks of Lake Oswego. We all love the parks. The city manager's office said after the election, with the passing of the Citizens Initiative 3568, the city commits to uphold the voters' requests for additional protections of our natural areas. Any future property-specific changes will include voter approval. The Citizens Proposed Initiative 3568 will be adopted into law through the amending of Chapter X or 10 of the Lake Oswego Charter. Furthermore, the mayor said, Joe Buck, I would like to give special thanks to all the community members engaged in the Parks Measure campaign. Mayor Joe Buck said, Love LO Parks elevated the issue of the natural protections for a broad set of acreage within the city. The city will continue to work together with the Friends groups, Oswego Wetland Council, and the community on a comprehensive approach needed to enhance ecological conditions throughout the city, unquote. That's our mayor. The city's statements were disingenuous to say the least. Wetlands are fragile, they're rare, they're impossible to restore after development. Building a sewer line in a road through a wetland in a city park goes against everything that Chapter X stood for, everything. Why has the city ignored Chapter X, which has superiority over the city code? Are there no alternatives? We heard some tonight. There are some. Lastly, why is the city pursuing this madness? And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. The city should listen to this and stop trying to invade the parks. It's tremendously disappointing to continually have to fight the city over and over and over again to protect the parks of Lake Oswego. The DRC must reject this development in West Waluga Park. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, are there questions of Mr. Holmes? I did want to ask you, Mr. Holmes, on one of your points, you may have read the staff report of October 25th, which indicates in staff's view that installation of an underground sewer pipe in substance would be consistent with the preservation of a nature preserve as a natural area available for public enjoyment. Is it your testimony that there are some above-ground deleterious impacts on the preservation of a nature preserve resulting from an underground
Well, you
sewer
have to
connection?
dig it
And
up.
what are those?
You have to dig up the nature preserve to put in the sewer, and then you try to cover it up, and you have a boundary where there's no plants over the sewer line. It's never going to be the same. A nature preserve, that preserve has been there for thousands of years. And you can't just put a sewer line through and then cover it up and everything's back to normal. In my opinion, I'm not an attorney.
Are there other questions of this witness? Thank you very much. We
You're very
appreciate
welcome.
your testimony.
I appreciate you having me.
Kate Myers, did you wish to testify in an individual capacity?
I was talking about the condition of Baliene.
Okay. Ms. Myers indicates she has nothing further in an individual capacity, as I understand it. Mike Luowler? Excuse me for mispronouncing your name, Mr. Luowler. You are testifying tonight in opposition to the application. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
State your name for the record.
It's
please.
Michael Luolier. And I've been a resident here of Lake Oswego for well over 30 years, and live in the Palisades Neighborhood Association as well, and have been involved in the Cooks Butte cell tower fiascos, all three of them. I'll try to be concise here. I know it's getting late. First, let me just say that I really appreciate all of your time, and I feel like you're wanting to get the facts, make the right decisions, and do the right thing ethically and legally. So thank you for that. I am concerned that we have an attorney that, in my impression, has a definite bias against the city charter and specifically Chapter X. If I might ask, how many of you have a chance to read Chapter X? If I could see a show of hands.
We are here to listen to your testimony, sir, not to answer your questions with respect. And I would just tell you, earlier this year, our commission, along with the professional staff, worked on a testimony guide for effective testimony before the DRC. It's posted online, and it's also in the back of the room. What is your comment leading you to ask that question? What is the information you'd like to provide us?
Well, Chapter X was created to protect our parks. And I just wanted to understand that you all know that. It's quite explicit. It's not a matter of purpose clause, it's a matter of restriction. We're restricting, we the people of Lake Oswego have restricted commercial activities that would in any way impact our parks and natural areas. It's black and white, it's a fact. So I think given the fact that the Lake Oswego City Code includes Chapter X, this protects all designated Lake Oswego natural reserves and parks from any kind of commercial activities. Now, I've not heard anybody mention the fact that the West Waluga sewer proposal cuts down trees within West Waluga. The Chapter X is quite explicit about that. You don't go cutting down trees in a natural area, in a park. Not to mention the fact that this proposed sewer connection puts in a road. A road is a road, whether it lasts for one day or 100 years, it's still a road. And Chapter X says no roads in a natural area in park in Lake Oswego. It's black and white. It's not discussion. It's not a negotiating thing or an opinion. It's a fact. One of the things that I was concerned about when I first became aware of this event had to do with the Lake Oswego Community Development Code. And it mentions the different code criteria applicable to the applicant's request. This is a city document, and it mentions there's, maybe 15, 20. If I might just pass it on, you can take a quick look at it. Anybody want to see this? No?
What is I think we don't accept
There's no additional written
documentary
testimony, so-
evidence.
All right, well,
However,
anyway.
Are you referring
however,
to the
there
applicable
is a
standards?
request for a continuance, and I assume this could be presented.
Yes, to clarify, are you talking about the applicable standards listed
Yes,
in the staff
I am.
report? Yeah, so
Applicable
that's in the
regulations.
staff report.
All right, so the applicable regulations did not mention Chapter 10. That says it all. One of the comments earlier today had to do with avoidance. How do you avoid issues? Well, you would avoid all of this had Chapter 10 been included in the applicable regulations. That's significant. You can have an avoidance of the West Beluga invasion, cutting down trees and destroying part of the wetland, if that application had been refused. That's simple. Again, Chapter 10 restricts. It's not a purpose clause, it's a restriction. It's quite explicit. So I would ask that the DRC reject the application and support the people of Lake Oswego and protect our parks.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Mr. Louallier? We appreciate your testimony. Thank you for staying and providing it. It's very helpful.
My pleasure, and thank you all.
Mr. Steve Glacier, are you with us? Good evening. You're testifying in opposition to the application. Please have a seat and identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. I'm Steve Glazer. I'm a resident of Lake Oswego. I live at 15879 Kimball Street, just right across the street from the proposed development. Fellow citizens have done such a phenomenal job citing fact of why the proposed sewer line is not beneficial to our neighborhood, but I wanted to speak on a personal basis. Ms. Leek, you asked about construction and the grade of the area. So in Lake Oswego, this is, I would say this is relatively flat, but this area is not flat whatsoever. Terra Place was developed prior to when I built my house, which was 8 years ago. And to my understanding, Terra Place was wetland. It was filled in order to build those homes, which then forced all that water south into this area. When I built my home 8 years ago, of which I removed not a single tree, but planted an additional 65 trees, we elevated our sill foundation by 12 inches, specifically because we were building during the winter and this area is underwater. The removal of 43 trees, the grading, putting in a sewer line here will create an undue burden on myself and my neighbors and a potential catastrophe for water runoff. Staff cited that the hydrologist said there was sufficient drainage. There is not sufficient drainage. I've got muddy shoes on right now because I walked that area of undeveloped Baliene today. It is underwater, and it's been underwater every year since I've lived here for the last 8 years. Mr. Ayers showed the proposed stormwater mitigation. Oh my gosh, that's going to be so insufficient. That water is going to run onto my property, and I'm going to have issues. So again, I believe the city will be complicit in creating a disastrous runoff situation by the removal of these trees, which, by the way, I understand we're talking about 43 trees, and I understand that a lot of decisions are made in a vacuum when it comes to taking down trees. There won't be a removal of 43 trees. This is, and I know that's what we're talking about tonight, but this is the removal of 43 trees for the sewer line. The rest of the property will be detreed as well. The rest of this property, all these trees that manage stormwater runoff, that are the best for our water mitigation, runoff mitigation, those are gone too. So 43 trees is significant, yes. All the trees on the property, or virtually all the trees on the property, is even more significant. Again, this will create an undue burden on all of us, the residents that are adjacent. The city has already created that issue by developing Terra Place and pushing all this water south. It will continue to push south and towards my house. Oh, that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Glazier? Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it. Are there other people here this evening who wish to testify in an individual capacity in opposition? If so, please come forward and state your name for the record. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Bill Jarshila at 1485 Timberline Drive, and my testimony is really pretty simple and high level. I'm a voter that supported what is now Measure X, and I believe this particular land use issue violates the basic clauses at the beginning of that. I could read them off. Other people have done that. I also, from experience, I mean, on a personal note, I live near Woodmont Park, which was a natural park. And if you're familiar with that case, it was rejected because people that were actually historically on Parks and Rec, 2 people, got the city to overturn the first plan to make it less developed. So there's a long history of protecting this, and I just find it inconsistent with Chapter X in the, well, it's not in the code, it's part of the chapter, the charter. So that's my testimony. I would have written a letter, but I missed the deadline, so that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you very much, and a request has been made to continue, so you will have an opportunity, as I understand it, to submit further written material if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in person or online who wishes to testify in opposition? Yes, sir.
For the HOA, I don't know if that's on the record, but I don't want to miss the chance to talk. That's okay, I'll just speak in person. I'm speaking.
Just a moment. So the gentleman wishes to testify on behalf of a homeowners association.
I can do it personally too. I'm the head of the homeowners association.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bowers, go ahead. You can speak in your own individual capacity, please.
Well, wait, this is important. Has he signed up to speak on behalf of the homeowner association?
I didn't have his name on the
I
list.
did at the door. So I signed up personally for me, but I also signed up at the door for homeowners. I don't have to. I only need 5 minutes as long as.
Well, true, but I just want to know who we're hearing from. So your testimony.
It will be the homeowners association.
Is authorized by the homeowner association.
I am authorized to speak on behalf of the homeowners association.
So how much time does he have?
10 minutes for homeowner association.
I'm not going to need it.
You have up to 10 minutes. Please
So,
go ahead.
yes, thank
State
you.
your name for the record, please.
My name's Neil Bauer, and I feel bad for everybody because I am the least impressive person in the entire homeowners association. We have a Turkish brain surgeon who is at OHSU. We have a man with a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon. We've got a person who taught cardiopulmonary at Harvard, and somebody who did legal counsel for the Democratic National Convention.
What homeowners association are we talking about?
Carmen Gardens.
Thank you.
Right, Terra Place. The Terra Place. So everybody else is far more impressive. They're out saving the world, and I'm just trying to save the neighborhood right now because every responsibility in the neighborhood usually falls on the person who's not, taking brains out or fixing hearts. So my opposition represents the voices of every member of the Carmen Gardens HOA. I am the president of the Homers, whatever, doesn't make a difference, but I'm the head of the Homer. I've been here for 15 years. I've spoken here multiple times. And so here's the thing. The last person who talked is correct. Terra Place was built up. And I said it before, and I was immediately shot down and told that it was not true. It is. I actually have photo and video evidence of it because the person who lives opposite. Is it possible to put up the slide from earlier so I can show what I'm talking about? It is slide. It is from Ellen Davis, her presentation, Exhibit E05. So it's like, I think, page 4 or something like that. So it's going to be right around the A and R in Carolyn, so just get ready for it. But I'm happy we can share it because it was going to be why I was going to ask for a continuance myself because I needed to do it. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry to put you on a spot like this. Okay, so this is zoomed in, and it's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to redo it. Can you go to the next slide? Because I want E5. So, oh, here's E5. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this. Look at 1 and 2. It's real small. And then look at 3. It's over there. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, go to the next slide. Perfect. So all we're going to do is that blue box is all we're going to do. That's it. That goes right through my house and half of the neighbor's house. So it's just there. That's okay. But the person I'm talking about who shot the photos and has video proof lives in the same cul-de-sac, but on the opposite side in that little tract right off of Wesley. So that person lived there, Mike. We've known him forever, since we moved into the neighborhood, because we had no idea. Our problem is we have massive drainage problems. Our yard has had to be replaced 3 times because we live in the downside of the neighborhood. All the water rushes down and washes our lawn away. So that has happened 3 times. There has never been a winter where the water did not seep into our yard from the wetland. I want this slide up because it's pretty important. So actually, next one. 614 was one big one, and EO6. Perfect. So here's the deal. Oh, and I need a slide that has the trees too. So here's the thing. They're just like, look at this. Look at all that open white space at the top. It's just about presentation. I know they don't have to show everything. But 1 and 2 is the area that I'm most concerned about because there was a slide from the builder, from this group, who said most of the trees are going to be removed from 1 and 2. And if that happens, can we go back 1 slide? I need, perfect. You are awesome. I'm so sorry to do this to you. I'm just trying to get in all my stuff. Can you go back 1 slide? 1 more. So there's trees that are going to be removed. There's big X's up at the top that say those are going to be removed. Those look to be very much on the other side of the path. So can we go back 1 more slide? I need to get a picture of the neighborhood. I need to show the neighborhood. So can you go forward to 6 maybe? Hang on a sec. Keep going. 1 more. 1 more. It's in there somewhere. Keep going. There we go. So all of those trees that they're looking to be removed, there's a bunch in there. There was a number. There was one that had a number in it. Can you go forward 1 more? I know this is taking my time. This is what I need to do. Oh, this is the best. So here's the deal. Well, look at all those trees that are going in over there. Look at them. Look at them all in number 3. They're all going in number 3. 1 and 2 look to be avoided. And the problem is this. In our area, with the development of Terra Place, all of the trees that are in that wetland behind our houses and on the other side of the track have taken on the water of the wetland that existed there. They are all oversaturated, overwaterlogged, and what happens is, because the weather's very dynamic, they start to freeze. The water in those trees starts to freeze. We've got an arborist who can attest to this, and what happens is it makes those trees weaker on the inside if they're retaining a lot of water. So when the spring comes, the trees get hot, trees start to break, whether it be ice storms or wind storms. Every house in Terra Place has been damaged. My fence has gone down twice. We've had other neighbors go down as well. That is happening now because of what has happened with the wetlands. When we look at the slide, it was from her presentation that said, oh, we're just going to remove 67 trees from 1 and 2. There are only, can you go forward? I want to get this perfect because it's so great. It looks terrible. Keep going. 43, keep, is that the one with the number? There's, shoot, I'm so sorry. It may have been her presentation, but there's like, all the trees are going to be removed from 1 and 2. And there's only, behind my house, there's this little green spot. That's what I'm looking for. There's a little green area next to my house that shows all of those trees have to take in all of that water. They're all dead. They're all going to die, and all those trees are going to fall on our houses. So I want to get through all that real quick. So we talked to, after the last meeting, and I'm so happy that we have these people here because they filled me in on a ton of stuff that was said that was just completely not on the record or just ignored, like my complaints. So here we go. The city council, who can't get 2 working microphones in a $1 million building, a new construction building, has just deferred the decision to the city planners who effectively are working with a builder who couldn't get his microphone on Zoom to work. They're going to be responsible for if something goes wrong. So we called insurance companies, all 4 of us. We got different quotes. And the insurance companies are like, this is freaking crazy. The insurance companies think this is nuts, what is happening. So at the very start, I'm not going to ask any questions, the very start of this meeting, all these people said, I haven't been there. I haven't checked out that area. I haven't been there. I haven't seen it. Why don't you go over there? Take a look at Baliene. Look at the state of Baliene. It's terrible. Come to look from our house. When it starts to rain, it's a lake. It's beautiful. We have ducks. We have geese. Come on out. And that'll last for like 4 months. We get freezing problems. We get rain problems. We've had to deal with our lawn being washed away 3 times. It's like, and you're like, I just didn't get there. And an arborist who's saying, this is fine. All these trees absorbing this water, they'll take it. They'll take it like a champ. And you know what? We get rid of them bugs. We got to jump on them bugs. Whatever. We're going to be drowning. We'll have mosquito problems because there's so much water. Oh my God, I should have brought some water up here. I'm dying. All right, that's it. As I said, I feel bad because you've got the least impressive person in the Homeowners Association to talk, but I just want to make sure I'm on the record that my voice, my passion, oh, here's the biggest thing. Holy cow, I almost forgot. I got 2 minutes. So I work in tech. I work in IT. I have raised $26 million for charities. It's still the least impressive person in my neighborhood, right? I'm not very, I don't go bragging about it, but here's the deal. The builder on the video earlier had an unlisted video. So when she showed her video, it was her testimony, it was unlisted. So when I submitted my testimony last time, I have the analytics. The analytics is very hard to say with your mouth this dry. Analytics from Google. And I saw the 6 videos that I had up had 4 views total. I'm like, did anybody see them? They were my testimony. I put them up there. They were on the record on her unlisted video she made for this, she had 4. More people saw her presentation before we did than saw mine the entire time it's been up. So the thing is, I know you're not paying attention to me, but I hope this makes it where you can't not pay attention to me. Does that make sense? It's a double negative. Anyways, bottom line, I just wanted to get my voice heard. This is my Type 5. I'll be doing the laugh track. I'll be doing the helium, whatever. But I'm open for questions. I just wanted to get that out there. And do you guys have any water? No water? Okay, that's all right. I have plenty around my yard. I'll get it later. But
any questions for Mr. Bauer? Well, Mr. Bauer, we appreciate your spirited testimony. And some of us on the commission have also served as presidents of homeowners associations, so we have great respect for your service. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we should applaud. Is there anyone else, either online or in person, who wishes to testify tonight in opposition to the application? Oh. Would you like to go? Kathy, why don't you come forward since you're standing? Darn. Good evening. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name's Kathy Lundeen. I live at 15825 Southwest Kimball. My property's right across from the double access lanes that are proposed for the development. I've lived in the same house for over 47 years, so I can add a fair bit of history to what you have heard tonight. What Neil just said is accurate. There was a swamp there, right where the development is, nesting waterbirds, cattails. I don't think I saw any beavers, but every once in a while there'd be a heron there. Turtles. That was drained and filled and then built upon. And they have had nothing but trouble since that development went in. It's right adjacent to the right-of-way, Baliene, so undeveloped. It's the pathway for the entire neighborhood. The right-of-way is muddy and waterlogged. I have traipsed through up to my ankles in water going through there, and this has been for 47 years. The neighborhood gets in there and maintains it because the city does not, you know, they don't have to. What I've heard tonight has raised questions. I was at the meeting where we heard that the proposed development would be annexed if and when the sewer was built. And yet it sounds to me like the properties have already been annexed into Lake Oswego. Am I correct? So maybe it makes one of my questions moot. I didn't realize there was a covenant that the developer could not ask for any other way to handle waste material except by the sewer that he would have to incur the costs of and make sure was constructed. So no septic permits were allowed to be asked, from Clackamas County. I kind of raised this because about 3 years ago, my septic system went gunny sack. Called the city. Can I hook up the sewer? No, I couldn't. I could if I assumed the costs of building the sewer line and then sold things separately. Was also told that a pump station would have to be put in because the area where Baliene and Kimball meet is lower, and so you have to pump poop uphill, I think. I'm not quite sure I have that accurate. Anyway, bottom line, I had to put in a new septic system. Clackamas County declared that I had to put in a state-of-the-art one. And I hunted around, got bids. I went with the lowest bid, which was about $40,000. It is essentially a mini treatment plant. And the water that comes out, I was told, I will personally not test it, not use it, but I was told that it was agricultural grade, clean, purified, so that it could be used. So I was just wondering why those types of septic systems were not thought of for the developed area rather than the sewer. I saw the master plan. I don't know, because I believe that that's the only way it can be done. Oh, no, I don't believe that's the only way it can be done. But anyway, I heard something else tonight, which made me ask a question, that somebody requested that a 50-foot wide street be put in. I don't know why. Kimball Street is not 50 feet wide. Why and where would somebody want a 50-foot street put in instead of 2 access lanes? I don't know. As I said, tonight has raised more questions for me than I would have liked. All the presentations were good. Some, of course, I agree with more than others. But, and I am done for the evening. If you have any questions, as I said, I can add some historical perspective. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, any questions? Thank you very much for staying and sharing your perspective.
I don't know if it was any help, but thank you.
Yes, it was valuable. Thank you. Sir, did you want to come up and testify? And this is in opposition.
That's correct, and yes, please.
Please come on up. And please state your name for the record.
You bet. So for the record, my name is Grant Howell, here testifying as an individual tonight in opposition of LU 23-2. So Lake Oswego code states that a minor construction should be allowed in a wetlands area if there's no practicable alternative. Practicable alternative is defined as being capable of being done after considering and balancing cost, existing technology and logistics in light of overall project purposes pursuant to LOC 5010-32. So the most recent sewer extension was completed in 2016 when a sewer line was constructed and subsequently a zone of benefit was established around Inverview and Bon Air Avenue. This highlights one of the issues of piecemeal development in Lake Oswego. It allows for situations where it can become difficult or impossible to properly engineer public utility systems that can effectively serve an area. So it begs the question of why would the city insist on constructing and maintaining public utilities in environmentally sensitive areas such as a park? I believe this is a poor decision. I would encourage the city to avoid constructing future public utilities in these areas. The existing sewer infrastructure in West Beluga Park is aging, with the oldest pipes being close to 40 years of age. Similar projects have occurred in Tualatin Hills Nature Park, where Clean Water Services replaced and upsized a 1.5-mile long, 40-year-old sewer line through the nature park. There were substantial disruptions to the park use, and it is unclear if the wetland areas have recovered at this time. I suspect that Beluga Park will have many future disruptions to repair and maintain other sections of the sewer line. I urge the DRC to reject this application because I believe the applicant has not met its burden of showing there are no practicable alternatives to locating the sewer and mitigating construction impacts in the wetlands in an environmentally sensitive area. I would also request a continuance be granted that covers both oral and written material.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Howell? We appreciate your detailed commentary. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Are there other citizens here this evening in person or online who wish to testify in opposition to the application? This would be in opposition to the application. Seeing none, I would like to invite anyone to be recognized who wish to speak who are neutral, that is neither for nor against the application, but wish to have something to share that might be of relevance. Is there anyone in the neutral category wishing to testify, either in person or online? Seeing none, I will turn to the city attorney for direction. Pardon?
Mr. Henley. Mr. Henley, I'd like to share something neutral.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, good evening, and may my testimony please the commission. My name is Josh Henley. I'm a resident of Inverview Road and have been for the last 13 years. I live about 250 feet south of the site. About 5 years ago, I annexed to the city and connected to the sewer and have some personal experience, not only with this, but also with some of the stormwater issues that I won't necessarily cover in the testimony today, but happy to address any Q&A if that's relevant. It's my understanding that it's the applicant and city's responsibility to carry the burden of proof in this matter. And from the materials I've seen, it's really hard for me to understand how they've carried that burden of proof. And there's really a lot of questions that remain. Some of those key unanswered questions are, when I reviewed the 2013 wastewater management policy that the city cited several times in its recommendation to the DRC, I noticed that there was a policy that said that the city had a lacking wastewater infrastructure policy and it said that that policy should be developed so that wastewater infrastructure is not put through wetlands whenever feasible. I asked Mr. Boone to share that policy with me because it had been 10 years since that plan had been put into place, and there is no policy. So we're sitting here today, 10 years later, without a policy, even though the city committed to doing that as it adopted the wastewater plan. So it's really easy for me to question how we're going to put this sewer pipe through the wetlands when we still don't have the policy that was promised to us 10 years ago. Also, I think there's a question about how this development is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. There was Ordinance 2687, which amended the city charter to protect wetlands. And as part of that, policy number 5 indicated that the city is supposed to adopt and maintain code incentives for the protection, restoration, and enhancement of significant streams, wetlands, and tree groves. All the testimony today is inconsistent with that. There's no incentives to protect these. We're here debating how much of the wetlands we're going to destroy. That's not protection, that's destruction. Cutting a 17-foot swath through the wetlands that can never recover, those 48 trees cannot be replaced. That's not restoration, that's destruction. The city has said they've determined physical availability. We've talked a little bit about the distances today and multiplying 5 homes by 200 feet. But the reality is that's not the only criteria. There's another criteria regarding physical availability in OAR 340-071-0160 that says if there's topographic or man-made features that make the connection not physically practical, that the sewer is not physically available. I would argue that if we're cutting down dozens of trees and permanently changing a wetland, that's physically impractical. The city's whole argument about physical availability was made behind closed doors. I made a public records request, and the city declined to provide any substantial information about how it determined that physical availability. Mr. Boone provided me a redacted 10-page memo that was completely redacted. There was no substantive information in it, and even upon further inquiry has declined to provide that memo. So we don't have access to that to really understand the city's true viewpoint on the issue, and instead we're taking a city position that is not fully supported. The city hasn't established tonight how the connection is unavoidable. We've talked about septic. We've talked about pump stations. We've talked about a lot of different opportunities with different sewer connections. None of those have been established. I reached out to the county to ask if anybody had talked about the feasibility of septic on the sites. There was an application that was withdrawn. The county's never made a determination. The county didn't indicate that anybody had been out there to do a site review to see what the feasibility of septic is. You've heard testimony from neighbors today who say they have perfectly functioning septic. So it really doesn't feel like this is an unavoidable connection. This seems like the city really wants to push it in a false narrative that frames it in a way that it is unavoidable when really there's practical alternatives. So since it's late, I'll quickly conclude. The information I've seen shows the applicant, all the neighbors who have testified today, and other stakeholders don't want this sewer extension. The silence during the public testimony was deafening. There was no support of this from the public. This sewer is a bridge to nowhere, and it's really about having the applicant roll over as to not risk their investment in the property, so the city will greenlight this through wetlands, which we know is questionable at best. I don't really think this application is about lot lines or wastewater or anything like that. What this really is about is the city furthering its ultimate goal to annex the properties on Kimball and ultimately in the Lake Forest neighborhood. We don't know what's in that memo that I brought up earlier, and I don't really understand how the DRC can be comfortable knowing that the city's true rationale for this has not been shared with the public. And frankly,
Sir, I think your time has expired. Could you just complete your sentence?
Last statement. I was originally testifying that I'd be neutral, but from what I've heard today, I've ultimately switched to be in opposition and appreciate the DRC hearing my testimony. Open for questions.
Any questions of this witness? Thank you very much for your well-organized, detailed testimony. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify neutrally, neither for nor against the application, but to provide some background or other perspective of relevance? Okay. Hearing none, it's my understanding, and I've been informed, we do have multiple requests for continuance. City Attorney Boone, do you have any guidance you'd want to offer at this point?
Well, yes, at this point, the applicant would have a chance for oral rebuttal to the information that's received, and then we'll deal with the continuance request.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. We would welcome the applicant back for rebuttal to testimony by others this evening.
Thank you. Danelle Eisenhardt again. I'll just keep this brief because it is super late and we're we're talking about a continuance, but the applicant's done all of their work to meet the applicable criteria that's listed in the staff report. We've gone through lots of rounds with staff. We've changed avenues of how to do things. And that being said, yes, we show 2 access lanes. That was conceptual to show the north one, but the south one's the only one is part of this application. And then for storm, the storm has been designed for that south access lane, and it does perk down there for dry wells, so that has been designed. And future houses will be designed for stormwater to deal with what's there, whether the infiltrate's low or high, right? A different type of facility will be developed for each lot depending on how well it infiltrates. And for the sanitary alignment, again, we're following the master plan and kind of the avenue that we've gone down with staff. Septic's not allowed in the code, so that's not even an option. We're in the city, not in the county. So that's not an avenue we can go from. I think that's about it at the moment. I'm just going to keep it kind of brief, and we can address things further at the next hearing.
Are there
Questions
questions of the applicant in rebuttal? I did want to ask, and this may not be very artfully phrased, but in connection with the annexation that we've heard about, it's been stated that the applicant essentially stipulated not to pursue other alternatives. Is there any information you can provide relating to that contention?
I cannot. I have not read that document, so I don't know what it says. Sorry.
Thank you. Having completed rebuttal, City Attorney Boone, what guidance can you provide at this point?
Well, before we talk about continuance, I am reminded that City Engineer Rooney will not be physically present at the continuation. So if the commission had any questions for technical sewer alignment, et cetera, this would be the time to ask. Or if you have anything you want to share to prompt questions, go right ahead.
Commissioner Sangre, you have a question.
This is it.
I have a question here, to the director. There was mention of an option to rebuild Baliene and in the process rebuild that short stub of sewer. Do you know whether that could be rebuilt so that it flowed downhill to Carmen?
I do not believe anybody's looked at that, but I'm just going to speculate based on my understanding is that if you change the slope of the sewer, that has a significant scope creep associated with it. And changing one line leads to changing the next line, leads to changing the other. And you could be affecting a very large number of properties that are currently existing that may have to change their slope and their connections as well. And we've not looked into that.
Just because you presume that it would be prohibitively expensive to do so.
That's one piece of it, but also because the master plan, I think there were red lines shown on that map before. What it shows is, although it's somewhat flat on Baliene, there is a high point. And at that high point, which is just west of Kimball, so between Kimball and Allison is a high point. And that's what we call the break point, and it flows downhill towards the east back into Waluga Park. So the master plan took that into consideration when it was laying out these red lines all those years ago, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah. Well, I appreciated all of that, but I was just wondering whether specifically you looked at the reversing that short distance of the stub. You answered the question. Thank you.
It's very shallow. The last manhole on Baliene right now is extremely shallow already. So I don't know whether or not we'd be able to get it to reverse the other way. It's very hard to anticipate
So
that.
a pump would not work going that way?
Pumps can work, but pump stations are an extremely expensive alternative to gravity. It is not our first choice. Gravity is your friend. Gravity is much more resilient. It is much more lack of, when you have power outages, pump stations go out and the poop backs up, just to put it lightly. We don't like to put in new pump stations for the very reason that they're expensive, there are long-term maintenance costs, and there's a lot of ramifications to it. So again, this master plan has a gravity alternative, lots of gravity alternatives in it that try to get the most, or the most financially sound approach to building a wastewater conveyance system, which is by using gravity first.
So a pump system would have to be maintained by the city, is what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
It wouldn't be specific to these 5 houses?
No, there are places in town where individual houses can, and this happens sometimes around lakes, not always here because most of ours go into the lake, in Oswego Lake, but in many lake communities, you have individual grinder pumps in an individual house that goes up to a line that's in the road above, per se. That's an option, but that means that the city's gravity line is up above. So you're pumping into a gravity line by individual houses. That would not be possible here. They'd have to pump up in the right-of-way, and that'd be 5 different private lines pumping in the right-of-way. If those fail, somebody 155 feet away is going to have to figure out that that's their failure. We don't allow private grinder pumps to go along the right-of-way.
Commissioner O'Connor.
How many city-owned sewage pump stations do we have now?
I'll probably get this wrong between water and wastewater. I think it's 13 with wastewater. And they are for low areas around the lake.
Right.
Merrillhurst Pump Station, the Willamette Pump Station down by what used to be the Ram, several around the lake.
So it is feasible to add one more pump station.
I'm not saying we don't have them, and I'm not saying they aren't possible, but they're only when it's impossible to do gravity or not as feasible. It's far more feasible to serve all of Kimball through a gravity system. And the master plan, which it's hard to go back and look at that, but that line goes to serve Kimball all the way down to, what is it, Lake Forest Boulevard. Because it's following the terrain, which is higher at Lake Forest and lower down here at Baliene. So it's not the most cost-effective way to serve an area through a pump station. Long-term maintenance costs, electricity issues, backup power issues, generators have to be installed. We don't have the property to put it on right now. None of this is our property. We'd have to buy property to install one. So there's a lot of issues associated with that that are not our first choice.
Thank you for that question and answer. Are there other questions of Director Rooney?
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about septic systems. And I just want to get confirmation that the city codes does not allow for septic, correct?
I think that the OAR rules say that if you're within 200 feet, and I think they just
300.
changed.
2 now?
Yeah, it's 200 feet. If you're within 200 feet of a sewer line, you're required to hook up. And we follow that quite rigorously. That's what causes annexation to occur one lot at a time around here. They're within 200 feet. Used to be 300 and just changed this last year. So that's what happens first. We do have, there are places in the town still that are still on septic and have not hooked up to the lines yet. It was part of a zone of benefit or a sewer installation that occurred. What happens there is when their septic fails, they're required to hook up to the existing facility out there. So a person here in the audience tonight said they're on Invery, and there's what we call a zone of benefit there, in that a developer came in, I can't remember which one it was in this case, came in, put in a sewer extension, and I don't know, 10 other properties in that area all contribute or will contribute to paying for that eventually. When their septics fail, they will be required to hook up. So we don't force you to hook up when the line first comes in, but when your septic fails, yes, you're required to hook up.
Thank you.
That answer the question. Yeah. But we're also, I mean, we're in a urban services boundary, urban services area here that requires us to provide urban services, which are wastewater, not septic, which are wastewater conveyance pipe systems and treatment. All of this area will eventually have to have a sewer.
Are there other questions of Director Rooney?
I guess my one question is, so if this line is not approved, if we turn this down, that means that sewer is not going to happen on Kimball. Because if we turn it down now, that's your access to get to sewer along Kimball for future development. Is that correct? There's no other way to put sewer along Kimball and make it gravity. Because everything on Kimball will feed into this line.
If for some reason we were told we could never make this access through the park, ever, then we would, in our next master plan update, probably in the next 3 to 5 years, would have to look at how would we get a different route to serve all of that Kimball area. And I don't know what that would look like since there's no good cross connections. There's private property there. But we would have to look at that time.
Thank you.
I would just clarify too that you would be making a decision on this land use application. And that doesn't preclude someone else coming forward with a different land use application, excuse me, that included that sewer connection. So it's specific to this land use application, not prohibitive.
Director Rooney, you've been here this evening. Do you have other comments you'd like to make in response to or in rejoinder to any testimony you heard that might benefit the commission?
There are a lot of sewers in this city that go through natural areas already. We talked about the ones that are in Oswego Park already. 99.9% of us don't even know where they are, right? You can't see them. You might come across a manhole now and then. All of those areas where they're in creeks, where they're in wetlands already from past work, they've all grown up and it's not visible. So I do think that one thing you have to remember is that things will grow back and it won't look like this clear-cut corridor 5 years from now. None of our sewers are visible that way to most people that are in wetlands, that are in stream corridors right now. So I think that the impact it has is temporary. Although we don't want trees close by, they do sneak in there just naturally. They do happen that way. The ground cover, the brush can all grow in up above it. And so it will have a temporary impact. There's no doubt about that, but it will come back as it has done all over the city.
Great. Well, thank you for your input and for answering our questions. City Attorney Boone.
Yes, now to the issue of the continuance. As the commission no doubt recalls, you have two options. And if you grant a continuance to a specific date, time, and place certain, it must be at least 7 days from today. An opportunity would be provided at a continued hearing for persons to present and rebut new evidence, arguments, or testimony. If new written evidence is submitted at the continued hearing, any person may request prior to the conclusion of that continued hearing that the record be open for at least 7 days to submit additional written evidence for the purpose of responding to that new written evidence that was submitted at the continuation. And then we would also provide for rebuttal time from that. So that's the continuance option. Oral and written, same process as today. Okay? And the opportunity to request a continuance for any new written evidence. The other option is for the commission to set the matter up leave the record open for 7 days for additional written evidence only. no oral testimony. And then then there's a rebuttal period to that, okay, as the commissioner calls. Now, typically, when we go that route, it's 7 days for new written evidence, and then a rebuttal period of 2 days, and then your hearing is that would be on Wednesday, and then your hearing is on the following Monday, providing 2 days for staff to do a turnaround. Now, I think Planning Manager Hasty has some forecasting for you based upon scheduling and staff availability.
So staff will not be available on December 4th, which is the first hearing of the DRC in December. So that the continued hearing, regardless of what sort of testimony is accepted, the continued hearing would be to December 18th. So there's some additional time to extend additional written testimony or the rebuttal. Prefer to leave as much time for staff to process information as possible. So I'll put that plug in there when you're thinking about deadlines for testimony.
Thank you. Well, my usual preference is to, when we have a continuance request, is to open it up just for written testimony. We have had a request from the Neighborhood Association and others, I believe, for oral and written. So I would be inclined to propose oral and that the continuance be for oral and written if the commission will support that.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that City Attorney Boone, what scope, if any, is on the information and testimony and evidence that can be presented in the continued oral and written hearing?
Well, the statute says an opportunity shall be provided at the continued hearing for persons to present and rebut new evidence, arguments, or testimony. So it's supposed to be new. Now, it's the challenge to the chair and to staff to say, oh, this is old, and then we have to, on the fly, kind of rule whether we've heard this before or not.
So the oral or written testimony to be received through the continuance is to be new information?
Yes.
And the rebuttal is the rebuttal to the new information that's received.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. To that information received that night, just to the written material, that information received that night.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe there's consensus to continue the hearing both for oral and written evidence and testimony. So could you propose a schedule for that, please?
Okay, so am I proposing a schedule for written testimony?
Or do we need to be that specific about in our motion to have a schedule?
Staff would be available on the 18th of December. That's the next time for the continuation for oral and written, okay? So then, that's December 18. Then we provide 7 days for additional written material responding. So that's December 25, okay? So that bumps it over to the 26th because that's a holiday, all right? Then there would be 2 days, if we keep with our same process, that'd be December 28 for any written materials responding to the written evidence at the continued hearing.
So, sorry, can you give us a moment?
The question was, why is there a period to respond to written evidence after the continuation of the hearing already? Okay. If new written evidence is submitted at the continued hearing, any person may request that the record be open for at least 7 days for an additional written evidence.
So to clarify, we're going to continue the hearing to December 18th. That could be continued again past that point
For
an
written
additional-
material only?
For written material only. So you will not be, it could be that you will not be deliberating on December 18th.
City Attorney Boone, do we need a motion to that effect?
Well, you need a motion to decide, to decide which avenue you're going, to leave the record open, or for oral and written material to continue, a full continuance, let's call it that. And then, depending on that, you need to set the dates, okay? Maybe that's the
Okay.
easiest way to do it, take 2 steps.
Very good. Then I would move that we continue the hearing for both oral and written testimony. Yes. Well, the city attorney has advised that we have to take it in 2 steps and can't have one motion with the.
Yeah, because I want to deal with the rebuttal times for that.
So the motion would be continuing the hearing on this matter, LU 23-0002, for both oral and written testimony. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Very good, that motion passes. And then I think the schedule I had heard was that oral and written testimony would be received
On December 18,
up through, what, is there a certain cutoff date for written?
well, the written would be
December 18th.
noon.
Noon on December 18th, and then we would have
December 18th.
oral testimony at the hearing proceeding, public hearing. And then 7 days for written testimony if requested.
Well, I don't want to guarantee, if written evidence is submitted, which contains new evidence, okay, then someone may request to leave the record open for written evidence to that written evidence that was submitted, rebuttal information, if you will, okay? And so that would be December 26th.
Okay.
And then rebuttal to that, okay, under the due process requirements, December 28th, that's a Thursday. And then your next meeting is not on January the 1st, but would be on January the 3rd due to the holiday. So that would mean that staff would have, well, on the 29th.
That's
which-
insufficient time for a month and a half of testimony, I would say.
Because then you've got Tuesday, and then the hearing's on Wednesday, so.
So do we need a specific motion with those dates?
Well, we're waiting, so what are you proposing then? You'd want to continue the deliberation phase to like the 15th, or the 17th?
I think it's too soon to make that deliberation. We don't know if the second hearing is going to be continued.
Well, that's true, okay.
So I would move that you deal with that potential continuation of the second hearing then and establish your dates based on other hearings that are possibly scheduled at that time, including the wastewater treatment plant, ironically enough, and/or the North Anchor project. So there are those 2 applications coming to you. So that's what I would recommend, that we meet for, as you've moved, for written and oral testimony on December 18th. And then if a continuance is again requested, then we can establish dates that work with your schedule and staff's ability at that time.
Okay, very good. So I would move then that the oral and written testimony deadline for new evidence on the continued hearing on this matter would be December 18th.
Right, you voted on that.
That's done.
Oh, we voted, okay, I didn't think, I thought you were asking us to set a specific date, which we had not done in the last motion.
Okay, you're right. We're just on the process, I'm sorry.
So there would be a second motion needed on a date specific for this continued hearing, which I will again tell you that staff is not available on December 4th. So the next available known hearing date would be December 18th.
Commissioner Sangre, did you wish to make a motion?
Have our next hearing on December 18.
Thank you.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Very good. So The hearing on LU 23-0002 is continued for both oral and written new evidence, which deadline is for the written at noon on December 18th, and for oral would be in the evening on December 18th at our regularly scheduled meeting. There's a question in the audience.
The commission has no authority to deal with public record requests. You have a public records request. The commission has no authority. I believe Mr. Henley has already filed his petition with the district attorney. Right.
Thank you for raising that question and addressing it.
Going to give us an update?
Yes, I do have a staff update when the DRC is ready.
Yes, I was just looking for our agenda here. I think we're at this point ready to entertain any schedule review and management update information you might provide.
Thank you, Chair. So as we motioned earlier, you are going to be meeting remote on December 4th to adopt the findings for tonight's tree hearing. That's 499-23-001116-tree. I do also want to remind you that you have a joint hearing with the Planning Commission on December 22nd at 6:30 p.m. to review the Urban Community and Forestry Plan update, the draft. That'll be made available to you, I believe, in early December. Director Numanolu is working on that with our consultants right now. So I want to remind you that there's that joint meeting coming up, and you are very much encouraged to attend. Obviously, discussion about trees continues to be important for the city. I do have, as I briefly mentioned, I do have 2 upcoming hearings that I do know about. They have not been noticed at this time, so I just have tentative dates. I have the North Anchor DR modification tentatively scheduled right now for December 18th, so that will also be on that night with a continued hearing for this application. The wastewater treatment plant, they did request additional time to complete an analysis on tree removal, undergrounding utilities, and impacts on the sensitive lands. So they will be, they were scheduled for tonight, I believe, but they've pushed that out, and we are looking at January 3rd. That would be the Wednesday of that first week in January, since the 1st is obviously a holiday. So those are my management updates. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners have. Otherwise, I think it's time for us to go home.
Is there any other business we need to transact this evening? There being none, and without objection, our meeting is adjourned.